Today, we're joined by Julian Dorey, an ex-banker turned YouTube sensation. Julian, now represented by the WME agency, has over 573,000 subscribers and over 400 million views. Julian is renowned for his insightful interviews with some of the world's most intriguing personalities, including the likes of Sean Ryan, Michio Kaku, and more. In today's episode, Julian discusses the importance of long-term thinking. He talks about this in the context of persistency and how it took hundreds of clips to lead him to his first breakthrough. He talks about this in the context of innovation and how he's able to level up his content. He even talks about this in the context of money and how reinvesting back into the business has paid dividends. This and much more, let's get right into the episode. I was going to ask you about that though, by the way. Like when you were first looking at what equipment you needed, like how'd you know which top-notch equipment to get? Because I even looked through the internet and shit, and it was tough.
Dude, I found the weirdest forums online. I talked to Ty and Ryan, his audio guy. They knew about this because it kind of sparked like that day at Ty's thing, like me actually make the decision to do this in January 2020. And so I was going back and forth with him a little bit on some equipment, and then the way I figured shit out was Reddit. I asked the most exact, like, no way any motherfucker's gonna be able to answer this questions you've ever seen in your life, and every time someone was able to answer. Really? They're like, oh yeah, no, according to this, and I'm like, oh, you know? So it was, sometimes I get really stressed thinking back on it, because I'm like, oh my God, all the little things that could have gone wrong that my dumb ass could have fucked up because I didn't understand any of this shit, and it worked out. You know, even like when there's stuff I see now at the beginning with the production, at the beginning of the show where I'm like, I see stuff from like 3 months ago. I'm like, oh God. But all in all, to come out of the gate like it did, I feel like, you were there. You were on the first episodes, number 25.
Yeah.
So I feel like it clicked.
You're someone that remembers every little detail, every episode, when certain times happen, when certain things happen at what certain times.
Photographic memory, bro.
Do you actually? Mm-hmm. No fucking way you do.
Yeah, I do. You didn't know that?
Well, I always knew that you remembered shit really well, but
I thought everyone could do that until a couple years ago.
Is it like Mike Ross situation, or are you talking
like who?
Oh, you haven't seen Suits before?
I've watched like a little bit of Suits, but not a ton. It's not like this. It's not like if you give me a page of a textbook and I read it once, I can download it. It's not like that. But will I be able to download certain sentences and paragraphs? Yes. Will I be able to tell you the page number if I really look at it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I can, when I was on with Chris Antich recently on his podcast, he was going through like different episodes and I was giving him timestamps of what we talked about. Like,
that's crazy.
It was. And I went back and checked them later. I'm like, they're kind of right. Like, wow. Pretty good.
With all the information overload, though, did that scare you away from starting? Because I'm guessing you just read about so much different shit.
Oh, dude.
You're trying to piece it together.
The thing is, I had no choice. By the time I went to do it, you were there. The whole world stopped. I had been trying to leave my job for 6 months. Every opportunity, I got kicked in the ass trying to get out there to get the lowest jobs in New York City, paying me $38,000 a year to work in New York, which, you might as well just be homeless. But I wanted to prove myself, and they wouldn't even give me those. And then I finally had a couple breakthroughs, like February 2020, and then, boom, it hits, and there was nothing else to do. And it was like, I just went into it with the great unknown, eyes wide blind, that I just went with it. And I think about it sometimes now. I don't have a lot of time to think back on stuff, but once in a while, like late at night, I will think about all the things that had to happen just for me to be at this point, where I'm treading water, but getting there, just to get here. The number of perfect little universal things that had to fall into place. It's stressful, but there's a quote from Rick Rubin that he said in a little bit of a more complex way. I don't remember the exact words, but I had read this about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And the gist of the quote was, sometimes the pieces have a way of falling into place that it's almost as if the universe wants it to happen. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time, like the first moment I recognized that, whoa, that was a thing when I was making a clip in July 2021. And then I started realizing it over and over again, like, whoa, that wanted to happen, that wanted to happen, that one. There's just this weird rhythmic timing of the universe. I'm not trying to get like too meta or like woo woo, but there's a weird tick of the clock that lines up things at just a certain time. Like sacred geometry.
Yeah.
I'll fuck it up. Everyone will yell at me, but it's like your distance from your belly button to something else on your body is exactly 1.618, and then your arm length divided by something else. Like everything is that.
Yeah.
The fact that you have something like that in the universe, and the universe is comprised of numbers and math and everything kind of coming together, and then you have art. You wouldn't think that in art there's like those patterns that form numerically, but it's true. It does. And it happens both in the art you make and in the process of making it.
So how much would you say then part of that's just the law of trial and error to get to that eventual outcome versus, the stars aligning?
It's both. And trial and error creates the stars aligning too, because what happens during trial and error? You're learning what not to do and gets you closer to what you have to do.
Yeah.
I remember the first time the cloud lifters came in, I plugged those bitches in. I thought they were having sex with my ears. I mean, it was like, whoa. You're like sitting there, you suddenly, the volume's down here, whatever. You plug that in. The volume's here right now at the same volume. You're like, whoa. So I don't know what that is. I don't know how that shit works, but that's fucking awesome. We're keeping that.
That's hilarious because I also remember that I fucking have cloud lifters, but I forgot to bring them here.
I'm telling you, for 2 years.
Yeah. I bought them when I talked to you. You're like cloud lifters. And
they've been sitting and dusting for 2 years. God damn it.
Dude, it's been a couple months, but I think what's really cool about your specific story, because obviously I knew you for a while.
Yeah, man.
You were actually the first person that gave me alcohol.
Where's Adam just left? He was there too.
At our friend's basement, friend's cousin's basement.
Yo, your boy hooked it up.
Just a bunch of dudes getting turned.
Your boy hooked it up. I ain't gonna lie.
Went a long way. But when I graduated college, how I personally knew you, and this is before I even understood how the world worked, what financial professions, what they even were, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't even know much about the finance industry. But the one thing I knew about you is that you're really good at connecting. And a lot of the habits that I learned from connecting actually came from you initially. But what surprised me the most is that all those skills that you learned, you took an approach that most people wouldn't take in your position. Probably for you, you could have made a shit ton of money going down that path if you continue to do so. But you knew in your heart, you're like, hey, what I'm doing right now is like not what I want to be doing in the future. I just don't see myself doing this. And you did a 180. Like, can you talk a little bit about that and, what you were doing before and how that led to your eventual, like, hey, I'm going to quit my job?
Well, you guys played a big role in that. And there were a handful of other people. You, Mitch, to an extent, Matt, while he was here as well, for sure. And then Chaz Servino, my buddy Andrew Barksdale, Ty Martin, to an extent. Like there's some people who played a role in kind of pushing the idea that, hey, maybe you want to do something else, right?
It was like a red pill, blue pill almost, so to speak.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but I guess so. Yeah, like the Matrix. But I've always been a little bit, to my detriment sometimes, a little bit romantic about how I make money, right? I don't want to make money for things that I don't like, and I don't want to make money for things where I don't feel like I provided you value, right? I just don't feel comfortable doing that. I'm like, no, I'll give that one for free. I'll do the next one for money. We'll get you value there, which is not... I'm getting a little better at that. I have some people in my ear who know better than me and are teaching me a little bit. But obviously, Larry, too, who I worked for. You knew what I was doing at the bank and working in ultra high net worth on Wall Street. It was, the connecting part of it was fun, but that's a piece of the job. The job itself is you better do your job and provide value. And I was good at that. I didn't like it, though. I didn't enjoy it. It didn't get me off. I'm me working. I mean, you remember me in suits. I remember going to the Kiss store, and Matt's like, this motherfucker's really coming from work in a suit to the Kiss store.
You only wore suits before.
And I'm like, well, I only wore suits at work. I mean, let's be honest. I was rocking a cutoff and a fucking beanie the minute I got out the office. But that's what I mean. It was almost like, for a guy who came this close to becoming an actor in college, in hindsight, it was almost like I was acting for 4 years. I never looked at it that way. It never consciously felt like that. But looking back on it now, it's like you put on that suit. It's like putting on in my case, a fucked up bat suit and becoming, the bank Batman for the day. And you don't like it. You're not saving lives. You're not doing anything. All you're being told at a bank is what to do and how to do it. And God forbid you try to do something smart, they yell at you. I mean, it's made of rules around there. And listen, I get it. There's legislation. They've had some tough times at banks. So I get it. But I remember, without going into specifics of some rules, I remember like some rules we have with our clients that I'm like, I'm going to break this every day of my life for the rest of my career.
And can you talk about some of those rules?
I'll give you one.
Yeah.
You couldn't text a client. Motherfucker, I'm texting every client I have. I'm sorry.
Wait, you technically weren't allowed
You weren't allowed to text a client.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I'm a connector. I live my phone. I'm on the phone a lot, but I'm also, what am I doing? I'm working the phones with text throughout the day too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is so fucking stupid. And going back to out of the diarrhea of mouth here and getting to your original point, I just got to a point where I loved Larry. He was amazing at his job, self-made in it, had built this business for 30 years himself, like before I got there, and then had a team come around him over the years who was incredible, who obviously helped him build the business as well. And they were all awesome. But it's like they were great characters and great actors in a really bad script. I didn't like the script. If you don't like the script, you can't do the part. And Larry, the way that business worked was the first 4 or 5 years out of college, you grind like a dog, you wear a suit that's really from some shitty factory like Joseph A. Bank or something. It looks like it's expensive, but it's not. You have no money. And then if you do a great job, boom, you get the offer. Now you make a lot of money. And I worked so hard to get to that point. But the second half of that time working hard, you were there for that. I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Yeah. And Larry knew that. And he was like trying to pull me in because like we were so tight. But when he went to give me the offer, he knew at that point I was going to say no. But the ease with which it was just such an instant no in my head was very much like, okay, I need to do something totally different because, the Laxamana brothers have awakened something that always existed in me. And Chaz Servino's awakened something that's always existed in me. Ty Martin's awakened something that's always existed in me. And, maybe I should stop listening to the plan and start making the plan, right? I remember we had a meeting one time. I still have the video, April 12th, 2019, where we used to sit around the table and like have the cameras on us or whatever. And I still, once in a while, will watch. It's one of the few clips of myself that I can watch and not in any way cringe at it because I'm like, yes. And it's like a 2-minute clip where I talked about that plan. And I realized it was like advice, because this is, I ended up turning down the contract late summer 2019. So this is like advice to myself. And I talked about that whole, you grow up, you're told to work hard in school, you get good grades, so you hopefully get into a good college, you go to college, you have fun, it's the best 4 years of your life, right? You do okay in classes, you make sure you pick some sort of major that's good, and then, by the way, use that, leverage it into a job, go out in the world, pay your dues for a couple years, hopefully rise up in the next level of the company, get to a point where you're in your lane of what you want, you find the girl, when you're X number of age old, you fucking get married, you have a couple kids, by 40 you're playing golf on Saturday mornings, and now maybe you're only working till 4 o'clock on Fridays, you save up for your 401k, you get it bigger and bigger and bigger, you rise up the ranks, you get a couple magazine articles about you if you're in some stupid fucking industry business on some little magazine, and then you're 65 and they say, get the fuck out of here, and you go to Florida, you look at the sun, you wait to die. And it's like, is that all there is to this? Like, what's the purpose in that? What are you doing? Yeah. Like there would have been a lot more purpose in that maybe 60 years ago when America was on the boom coming out of World War II and we were building the industries that became us. But now we have to get to that, but we don't have to get, we already are at that 2.0 or 3.0 stage where it's like you're building on the initial blocks now and you're changing what it means to be human, which is scary too. But I wanted to be on the cutting edge. And I knew you guys, you were young, you had a lot to figure out just like me. It's not like we were all geniuses, but like Mitch was making fucking stupid money and trying to get out of his job, and he was working in something that was more like, it was tech, new era, whatever. Like he's even in a better spot than me, and he's trying to get out to do cool shit. Yeah. You were trying to get out to do cool shit at the time, and you were doing A lot of tech shit too. I see you coding over here today, right? But I'm like, okay, there's a lot more to this. You know, in college, and this is not a shot at college. I'm always open about this. I have no complaints about my college. I know a lot of people.
I mean, Bucknell's great, not only experience-wise, but great fucking school.
It was fun, man. But, you know, I was lucky. I thought I got a really, really good education. So this is not a shot at college with a good education, but college cannot teach you the real world and how it works. You have to go out and do that, period. You know, I'm very, very convinced. I don't care where you go. I don't care if you go to Harvard or wherever. You're going to have to go out there because the world, like I learned a lot of the world watching Chaz. Chaz is not the guy who's going to go in and get a 1600 on the SAT. But Chaz is one of the most emotionally intelligent, business-driven people I've ever known, where he has the perfect marriage of the two. Yeah. And he will always put the people over the business. And I see how people talk about him and how much they love him. People call him up to do business with him and they don't even know what they want to do business about. They're just like, let's do business. And I would watch this. He gave me a right-hand man seat to that. And that's when it really hit me. I'm like, man, forget who you know. It's about how you treat who you know. And what the motive behind that is. And maybe that's why I wasn't the best banker, because I didn't push business on people. If they wanted to do that, that would come. Turns out they all wanted to do business in other things besides the bank. But, you know, because money is a little bit of a weird thing. But I felt the connection, man. You know, to me, it was no different. Like, forming a relationship is, like, in business, is in many ways no different than forming a relationship with a woman you like. You know, you don't want to be thinking about what she looks like naked. That's not a good idea. You can do that later. But when you're in the moment, you're meeting the person. You understand who she is, what she's about, what drives her. You know, what she wants to do, what her dreams are, how she views her current reality. These are questions that get to the core of somebody. And that's, I don't know, I guess maybe I never thought about it in business and I got good at doing that.
Well, when I first met you, well, not when I first met you, coming out of college, I could actually never tell if you were talking to a client or not, just because of the kind of questions that they were asking you outside of your actual like client and person relationship, which validates what you're saying, right? Like clearly you always viewed it in that sense, actually. And I think Chaz almost awakened it a little bit, but that's kind of why I liken it to the blue pill, red pill, because it's not like when you first came to my Jersey City house. So this is after I graduated college,
2018.
Yeah. Young buck, wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. Just had a computer engineering degree. And you came over my house. Like I remember that scenario because you came downstairs, you were still in your full suit. And you're in a suit at that time.
Not the first time I went there. January 2018.
The first you were in a suit?
Dude, I was rocking. What was I rocking? I remember that night walking down the steps and Aman was just sitting there baked out of his mind. What was the...
I thought you were in that dark blue suit.
No, that was later.
Oh, gotcha.
That was the next time I was there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, one of those times you walked down there and I remember just a bunch of kids chilling in the basement in Jersey City. I didn't know what you were going to think because at the time, if you look at it from my standpoint, I just graduated college. So I look at you as someone that's like successful. Oh, they're in the right career path. You know what I mean? Because you don't really have a North Star. You just assume like, hey, if someone has a job after college, like, yeah, that's North Star, you know? But then you started asking us like, what the fuck are you guys doing down here? You know, but not in a mean way. You're like actually genuinely curious, which slowly over time, it's not like that was like an aha moment. It was like slowly over time, you start becoming more and more curious about different things. Yes. Not just with us, but with other people, your clients, like opened up different doors. But in that regard, even though it was a gradual buildup, like when was the definitive moment when you actually said to yourself, like, I'm not going to be doing this shit anymore. I'm not going to be doing banking.
Well, there was a long period of denial about it. Like where my subconscious is saying it, but I'm not saying it. The definitive moment was, so Larry called me, I guess like end of July 2019, and told me, hey, the offer's coming. Take a few days to yourself, go think about it. And immediately I kind of knew the answer was no, but I went down to the shore with Chaz, and he was at a real crossroads because all the bullshit over at that place. Mm-hmm. And he hadn't said things consciously to himself yet. And his wife, Lauren, was there, and the three of us were just sitting on the beach, like the two of us talking it out, with Lauren coming in every 10 minutes to tell us how dumb we were and how we needed to get to the point, which was very helpful. And, we got to a moment there where first he was like advising me on what to do, and I'm like, fuck, I'm going to say no. I'm like, God damn, I have never had a dime in my life, and I'm about to pass up a fuck ton of money.
For context, how much more money were you going to be making?
A lot.
Like 4X, 3X?
Larry gave me the nicest offer I'll ever get from somebody.
Oh.
He offered me a percentage of the business.
Oh, shit, really?
Yes. Yeah. Like he offered of all the incoming business we were going to do. And then, of course, he had a record year immediately when I turned this down.
Holy
when
shit.
I was doing the math, like 9 months later of what I would be making, I'm like, never look at that again.
How much do you think it would have been worth, like ballpark estimate? Are you allowed to say or nah?
Well, I'm not going to say how big the offer was, but for me, it was big. And, I lived paycheck to paycheck my whole life. Mm. So that would have been over, And I was like, fuck, I'm going to say no. And then I don't know if it was 10 seconds later or 5 minutes later, Chaz was like, fuck, I got to leave today's business, which is a company he built.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. It was like a powerful thing. And we both kind of went on our way there, and here we are today. But that was the moment. But there were a lot of moments leading up to that. I mean, I always tell people like I lived in Jersey City half the time, which is pretty accurate. And just the vibe in there, and just getting involved with shit, even stupid shit, stuff that now we laugh about. Like, oh, I can't remember when we did that. But it was like there was a real cutting edge feel to it. It felt like startup-y. And it got me comfortable with doing everything that like I feel like I'm on earth to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was definitely always like, again, something I'd never thought about back in my life. And then at this time period, I started to think back on it. I've always been an artist. That's what I am. And then I started thinking, and I'm in a job crunching numbers. Why the fuck do you think you hate it so much? Right? And so I knew I needed to get to that side. I was getting real in touch with my creative side again, being in that house. And then, when we went and did media work, whether it be at the Maxwell's in 2019, stuff like that gave me a real rush. And I remember when Chaz wrote me into doing Vince Papali, Chaz and your brother wrote me into doing Vince, Jeff Munkin, and then Coach Urgel and his wife back to back alone. Yeah, you edited that one at the Maxwell. Shout out Coach Munkin. But when he was like, Chaz is like, I'm going to go with Ray, because Ray Lewis wanted to do his thing upstairs, and he was Ray's manager, so that meant, Chaz, you're going to be here with me.
Ray
right?
Lewis, we're talking about here.
Yeah, Hall of Famer. So he's like, Ray wants me to go up there with him. You got this. And I'm like, what the fuck you mean I got this? I don't know what I'm doing. And we sat down, and Mitch is like, Jules, you're going to be great. So the best was when Jeff Munkin was, I didn't know what he looked like. It was because we hadn't looked at anything with him.
I don't even know what he looked like when he gave me the
He was
footage,
standing
dude.
right here. I get out of Vince Papali. I'll tell you that story in a sec. But after I walk away from Vince, I'm like, Mitch, who we got next? He goes, Jeff Munkin. And I'm like, who the fuck is Jeff Munkin? And Jeff's like, hey, how are you? I'm like, God damn it. He's like the coach of Army. So he's like, Mr. Like, I'm like, hey, coach. I'm like looking at the Wikipedia. I'm like, fuck it. We'll do it live. And he was a great guy. It worked out great. Great coach, seriously. But at the end of Vince Papali, who was from the Mark Wahlberg movie Invincible,
Yeah.
True Eagles legend, he looked at me, like he pulled me aside. He goes, "What? Is this what you do?" And I said, "Wow, no, I mean, we do this on the side." I pull out my Merrill Lynch business card. I said, "This is what I do during the day." And he like took one look at it. He's like, "You should do this."
No way, really? He said that?
Yeah. And he's like, "You should do this." And that really planted in my head. And then when we went to do the event in June 2019, I guess, where all our shit ended up getting robbed, but we did all those sit-down interviews with all those people at the conference in Southern Manhattan. I remember at the end of the first day, I was like, oh, I could do this in my sleep. I could do this in my sleep. And it just felt, I've never felt like I can, I don't have the best attitude sometimes with telling myself what I'm capable of, right? I usually tell myself, Julian, you suck at everything. But this was one of the first times where I was like, yo, that's not the worst thing I've ever seen. There might be some hope here. And it felt like we just put mics, in that case we had the mobile mics and stuff, and cameras in front of me when I did what I already did half the time, just talking with people. Mm-hmm. And I just had an ability to forget that they were there.
Not just anyone. We were in the conference of, young leaders. So you had like Jesse Itzler, Brian Copeland, like even NFL football, you know what I mean? Just
yeah. I remember that because when you were talking with Copeland, there were a bunch of people around. When Jesse Itzler came out of the conference and sat down with me, there's 200 people watching, and I didn't feel any of it.
Which was hilarious, actually, if you think about it. It was basically just like a live interview in front of a bunch of kids. And I don't even know what attracted him to our table. He just wanted to kind of come over and see what it was about.
I wrote them.
Oh, did you? We're part of the conference.
I wrote them. I was like, Jess. I don't know. I have that effect on people sometimes where I'm just like very assumption. Like, yeah, sit down. And they're like, no. I'm like, yeah, no, you're good. Go ahead. Sit. Take a seat. And they just do it. And sometimes, like, we do that in the podcast sometimes too. Like, when someone's on a roll, I don't tell them, but I have a good biological clock now.
Yeah.
And I know when we're at 2.5 hours and they're just heating up, I'm like, well, this is going to be 2. So, like, at some point, we'll stop for a piss. And, like, I'll be like, all right, I really got to go to the bathroom. You're doing great. We're going to pick up right there. Obviously, this is going to be, like, the end of the first episode. I guess we're on episode 2 now. Anyway, we'll be right back, everyone. And they're sitting across from me from episode 2. What the fuck it? Like, you just kind of, don't ask now, apologize later kind of deal.
Just rope them in kind of deal.
Yeah. If you're right, as long you got to catch the vibe. If someone is not having a good time, which luckily we've only had one bad guest in the history of my podcast, but
I saw you move that episode too, but we'll get to
yeah. But even that guy, we gave 6 hours. That was 2 episodes unexpectedly, by the way. So don't say we didn't hear him out. But you just take a temperature, and it's no different in real life. You take a temperature of people.
And for your case, what I thought was also interesting is like as you're going throughout that times, like even though you're in the banking industry, you're always interested in trends that were happening and knew what was going on, whether it was around music. And part of that's you just have a lot of history with music, have a lot of connections in the industry itself. Yeah, so March 2019, that's when you actually first even introduced me to TikTok. And I remember I thought you were crazy, by the way, but I remember you telling us, dude. You're like, yo, this is going to be the next biggest thing.
Dude, I remember finding that. It was me on the app, a bunch of 14-year-olds, and probably a bunch of pedophiles. That was probably it. I was like, I'm clean. I'm just here for the content. But no, it was, I knew that one. It was so obvious. It was like, how do you hold a phone? You hold it like this. The video's up and down like that. Like, the graphics were beautiful. The algorithm learned your behaviors right away. I remember the first time I went into it, I had been researching it that day. And one of the things it used to say, I don't know if it still says this on the Wikipedia page, but it used to have in there, when the Wikipedia page was small, it had like, the app has received criticism for being incredibly addictive, with users planning to spend X number of minutes and they end up spending 3 hours. So I went into it on like a work night. I'm like, all right, I'm about to go to bed. It's like 10:15. Let's go take a look at this shit. And at 1:30 in the morning, I was like, oh my God. Like, I wasn't even that interested in the stuff I was just watching. But I was taking notes. And so I hit up every person I know who had a talent below the age of 25, and not one person took my advice. I was like, stop everything you're doing, get off Instagram, get off YouTube, get off everything, and go here. And I got a text from a couple of them a couple years later, like, God damn, you were right. I was like, I know I was right. It was so odd. Like, all you had to do was go on it.
Did you know how you wanted to take advantage of that then, though? Or was it more just like you knew this?
Because I didn't know I was doing a podcast.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was doing a podcast. But I knew I would get to it. Like, I know you guys, when you were doing your podcast, you started short form like right away. But I needed to hone my craft before I got there.
I was curious about that actually, because even when you first initially started the podcast, you didn't do short form for a while.
Yeah, I did 2-minute clips on Instagram, which doesn't count.
Yeah. What do you mean? You just want to make sure you're focusing on the actual content?
I
Is that
needed
what
to
you're
hone
saying?
my craft. I needed to make sure I got the cadence down. I was putting out an episode every week. Again, I did this all myself until April 2023. I still do a lot myself. Alessi's here today. Alessi does a ton. But that's it. I mean, that's our team. We have a couple contract editors that do some things that we produce, but you know, we're trying to expand the team. We got to get more money through the door. But you know, I put every moment of time and every cent into this podcast. You know, that's like, even right now, I have enough money to cover my tax bill for this past year. RIP. And I have about 3 months of funding in there. And that's what we roll with. So I'm trying to get that to 6 so I can take that 3 and knock it back down to 3 and invest it in the podcast.
Even when you were coming into it initially, is that all that money got, like the money that did you have a lot of money saved up before you quit your job fully? You just said, fuck it, cold turkey, I'm gonna quit.
I spent every cent I had on the equipment.
Oh, up front, like initially. Holy shit.
I had no money, man. I mean, you saw I lived in my parents' house.
Equipment's not cheap either. The shit that you got was definitely...
No, I knew I had to do that right, and I did do that right. But I had... God, I don't even remember the official number I had in my bank account day one, but it was low.
4 to 5 years of just savings gone.
Low. It was like, seek help. And I say this all the time because it needs to be said. The podcast never happens if 2 things didn't happen. Number one, and I'm careful how I say this because I don't want this heard the wrong way, but if the pandemic doesn't happen, the podcast doesn't happen. It sent me inside, forced me to do it. It also gave me time for the first time in my adult life to live without rent because my dad told me not to re-sign the lease. He was smart. He knew this was going to go on for a while. And Larry said, hey, we got things under control. Keep collecting a check from Merrill. Just do a little bit of work for me here and there. So the 2 of them, huge, parents and Larry. The time period, and then the fact that when the podcast launched, I started building this full-time April 1st, 2020. Really started building it in February 2020. And I moved out of my parents' house on August 1st, 2023.
Damn.
I moved into my parents' house in April 2020. So for 40-some months, for 39, 40 months, I did not pay rent. Podcast doesn't happen without that. Period. End of story. Yeah. So I had help in that way. I may have been doing it all myself, but I had help, and I'm very grateful for that because that's like being on second base right there. There's a lot of people who don't have that opportunity, and that also puts a lot of it in perspective for me because I'm like, you better fucking make it, because there's a lot of people who would kill to be in that position to be able to do. I talk to people all the time. That's not an option for them. They don't have a home to go to. You know, they can't stop their work. They don't have any, like, I built myself at least enough runway. I mean, you know me, like, I'm a simple guy. Shit, you got to take me to Zara to buy clothes, right? I really got to do that. But, you know, I will put my money where my mouth is. I'll eat dirt. And I did.
Well, mentally, and this is something that I don't even say I could recommend to anyone and everyone, but I've talked and spoken to many people that have been in a predicament where they went all in and, like you, didn't have much saved up. So when things were turning sour, not only was it mentally draining, but it obviously makes it very easy to just give up, right? Because at that point you're like, hey, you don't have the willpower to stick around, see it through, because everything's falling crashing around you, and most people quit at that point. But
most people quit.
Yeah, when you said that you're doing it full time, like I honestly never had a doubt in my mind that you were just gonna quit on that, which outside looking in, it might have seemed like you got here to where you're at today, and we'll highlight all the statistics in the beginning, but outside looking in, you know, it would have seemed like, oh, hey, this was just like meant to happen. But no, like the first 2 years, I even remember phone calls that we had, and even me being there, like it took every ounce of you. You were enjoying what you're doing, but it took every ounce of you to keep like being like, hey, I know why I'm doing this.
Right.
I know what the vision is. Like, can you kind of walk through that a little bit
Yeah.
because your money was gone out the door in the beginning. So you already went through that, one of the toughest parts in the very beginning, and it didn't ease up for a while.
I always enjoyed what I got to do when we sat down and did this. And I did enjoy editing. I love editing. I don't love it anymore right now because I've done nothing but look at frame rates for the past 4 years. That's all I've done. So I'm a little sick of it right now. It's like the artist who hasn't put down the paintbrush for 4 years. At some point, you're like, all right, this paintbrush can go fuck itself. You know, I got to come back to this. But, you know, I also got sick for the first time ever, which was scary. And then obviously, like, I'm fine. But that was not fun. And I didn't know what that was for a long time. And all in the middle of this, it was like I'm putting out an episode every single week, getting someone to my house every single week. As long as they have an ability to talk and physically be here, we'll do it. The bar is low, you know? But I had a lot of friends who were willing to come do that, and great people like you come do it. And yeah, I mean, you have dark moments. I always have prided myself on having the longest view in the room, because I think that, you know, to borrow a Sam Hinkie quote there, but I think that is something that in today's society is rare. Most people are today. I try to think more like someone from another country where they're not like that. But yeah, I mean, in moments on the way there, you have a lot of questioning, a lot of like, oh my God, is this going to work? Isn't this going to work? I never got to dwell on it though, because there wasn't time. I'd have that thought in the next minute I'm editing. It was like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it, which I still haven't, by the way. There's a long way to go, but we're on our way, right? I'm going to make it or I'm going to fucking die. And I remember when I had Matt Cox in the first time, episode 96, who's a real trip. Look up his Wikipedia. But, you know, he was a hardcore criminal and he's reformed now. But it's my boy. Like, he's, when people are, sometimes they're like, you're friends with Matt Cox, you better watch your back. Like, you don't, I hear you. You don't know him like I know him. But I remember him talking about his mentality. And one of the things that prison did for him is he became radically self-aware. In the past, he had zero self-awareness because he suffers from megalomaniacal narcissistic personality disorder. He's had that his whole life. It's from some childhood stuff. And he's short.
Yeah, it hurts.
Matt always talks about it. He's like, look at everyone who's tried to ruin the world. They're all short. But, you know, he, in the first episode, a few hours in, he said to me, you ever seen the movie Alive? I said, no. It's some older movie. And he said, it's a true story. It's about a soccer team or something that their plane crashed in the Chilean mountains. And it's snow. There's nothing around. They have no help. The pilots are dead. Most of the team's alive. And it gets to a point where if they want to survive, they only have one choice. They got to eat the pilots. And he said, if there's one thing I've learned about myself over the years, I'm eating that fucking pilot. I'm a survivor. And I saw that. And like, he was talking about things in a different context, but the way he said after the funny part of, I'm like, he was like, I'm eating. And he said dead serious, it's like, I'm eating that fucking pilot. I'll give you the clip so you can play it in here. But then when he's like, I think he said, I hope I remembered it correctly, I'm a survivor. In that moment, I felt that. Because I'm like, that's what I am. I will die to make this work.
Yeah.
All the people, and you know, there's a negative driven aspect of it too. There's like a lot of people who casted you off, looked down on you. Had a lot of that in my life. A lot of people told me it wasn't good enough. Finished second place all the time, you know. Tossed around by women. But I was like, to every last one of those, in this way, imaginary people. You know, it's not like there's a couple people. It's like a lot of people. It's like, I'll show you. Mm-hmm. You'll see me.
Well, I'm sure when you first, especially when you quit that job, again, just how our society works is like, you think someone leaves a nice job, white collar job, to start doing podcasting and making no money. Yeah, heads are going to turn. And the neighborhood that you had to stay at was also a neighborhood in that, people talk. Everyone's like, hey, what's Julian? You know what I mean? Like all that stuff happening around you. How were you able to get past that?
I think I got past that before the podcast ever started, because when I was thinking, I was thinking about every little thing that could give me an advantage. And I'm like, all right, when do I feel the most relaxed and not giving a fuck? Because that's who I am, right? So how am I going to embody that? I was like, well, after the gym, I throw on a Phillies Fitted, a cutoff, I walk around and pace and talk on the phone. I said the only difference is we're going to sit down now, but that's what we're going to do. Where I'm going to be, I beat this into my head, and I still say it all the time. I'm like, I'm going to be the loser kid living in his parents' house in a backwards hat who left a job that was offering him a lot of money to do a fucking podcast. And it's going to work. I'm like going to and I'm going to name it Trendifier because my dumbass bought that domain and I have no money left, which is like the worst name in human history. That's a whole nother story.
You're still using the email of a domain that I bought a long time. When I canceled that, I had no idea you're still using it.
Ugh. Anyway, but I'm like, if I could do that with a name that bad, and like, obviously we changed the name now a while ago, but then I could be number one in the world at this. It was like a challenge to myself. And so, yeah, I knew people talked. I knew people at the beginning thought I was stupid, but most of the people closest to me never questioned it. And I remember Dylan McDonald, day one, being like, so you're doing this? I was like, yeah. He's like, good. Chris Ibrahim said a very similar thing. Mike Spear, when he came in for the first time at the end of the podcast, he leaned back and he goes, you belong here. You say you were never a banker, bro. I never gave you money. I know he had it, but that reassurance early on when you have 25 listeners, it's big. It doesn't. I don't care who you are. It doesn't happen even when you're doing it literally by yourself. It doesn't happen by yourself. There are forces around you that drive it. You want to call it vibes. You want to call it people like your parents letting you do it in their house. There are people that help you push that car up the hill so you can put it in gear and roll down the other side. And I am fortunate, we focus on the negative side sometimes, like I pointed out with people a few minutes ago, but I'm fortunate to have a way heavier positive side with that. And I keep that in perspective for me. And I feel like when I go in there, I'm putting on for all these people. I'm putting on for you. Right? It's like Mike believed in me day one and told me to go pursue stuff I wanted to do. I better do this right. I that was always and always will be a motivator for me. And, maybe one day I'll make people proud, but it's like a drive to get there.
Well, let's put things into perspective here for everyone else. And what I'm going to pull up right now is Julian's been doing this thing where every week he'll post how many subscribers he's had, or he has now, or now or then.
You're unloading my secret here. I don't tell anyone what it is. Some people know, I guess, but
does anyone else know about your counter?
I don't tell anyone about it. This is the first time I've ever talked about it. I think
It's
Danny
fucking
Miranda
hilarious.
brought it up on a podcast. I was like, yeah.
This was the most brilliant thing, but also it could have been your downfall too if you just saw like 10 subscribers each week on every tweet. Which in the beginning, dude, I remember looking back.
Yeah. You posted
a
to this
lot
day,
this
I've
week,
never
yeah.
even put my Twitter link anywhere. Like, it's like a secret thing, but some fans have found me there. Still small. Twitter scares me. But that, Twitter was just for me. Like, especially when I was in my sad boy hours for a while with this. Just like sick as a dog, completely unknown, working at 3:30 in the morning, stuffed up to the brims, right? And I just, I don't even know what the fuck I tweeted out there. Oh, my God. But
I've seen some dark tweets. Sometimes when they're too dark, that's when I'd call you.
Yeah.
I'd be like, yo, you get it. So for everyone else looking into this, right? First tweet here was March 31st,
It's like 7 months in, I think.
2021.
I sent out the first one.
Yeah. So 7 months in, 294 subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
The next week, 302. The week after that, 345. The next week, 360. Right. So that's at 414. April 14th,
and then April
2021.
15th, it all changed.
Yeah, you doubled. So you got to 873 subscribers by the next week. So
I did
April
my first
21st.
viral clip, April 15th. I remember that.
And is that when you started using shorts specifically?
Well, I had started, John Rondi and I had talked a bunch, and I was ready to get started February 2021. And I did. And I got obsessed. And I started, it started with the progression of, we're going to make clips. We're going to make sure the clips are full size. You're competing against not podcasts. You're competing against all this amazing content that's full, 1080 by 1920. And then it got to, well, what if I put some music behind it? I'm an audio visual guy. Like make the people feel something. Started to fuck around with music for a while. Then some started to work. And then the time, I was like, what about the timing of it flipping 2 frames before to this person, or 2 frames before? I think I was 1 frame at that point. I was off. So the human eye has like a 2 to 3 frame lag, depending on the size of the syllables that happens. Don't live in my head with this stuff. But anyway, so I started to get once in a while some viral clips, April 2021. And John Rondi's another guy, huge credit to him, very successful, obviously on TikTok, long before me. Been grinding for years. But John was always, and to this day, is like a voice of reason with me on stuff because he has such a long game perspective on it and he knows the ups and downs of it. But in April and May, he was really hitting me up like, dude, keep going with this. You're getting somewhere. And then...
Are you talking about 2021?
2021.
Yeah.
And this is when I first built an audience. And then July, August were the big shifts. July, when I made the Ashton Larold clip, that was the moment I was referring to earlier when I was like, the universe wants this to happen. Because it was such a serious clip. Ashton Larold, friend of mine, great guy, brilliant artist.
You said July 2021, right?
Yeah. And he came on episode 45 for 3.5 hours, and he was so open about all his struggles. And that kid has had he came from a great home, but he's had a very tough life. And, there's a reverence you have when people start talking about certain things. There's a line somewhere. And when they go over that line, and I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean in the, whoa, okay, I'm a passenger on this ship now. Let them captain it, right? Mm-hmm. And when he started talking about, his suicide attempts and stuff, and how much he struggled with all that, and it's real, and you can feel it. I'm sitting in there with him. People could obviously, as it'll turn out, feel it on the camera too, but in there, your whole body just. And when he talked about, he was like going through it, he's like, I struggle with this, I struggle with that, and then he's like, mid in a sense, I struggle with, I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to be alive. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I remember I was looking, I wasn't supposed to go home that day. I was down the shore with my mom's side or dad's side working. We were going to the OD the night before. I was like a little bit hungover. And at 12 o'clock, I just said to my mom, I got to go home. I want to try to get a clip out tonight. So I get home. On the way home, I'm like, all right, I'm going to make an Ashton Larold clip. I love that guy. Like, he's just got such a presence. I'm thinking of the timestamps in my head, and I'm like, do I want to do that clip? And by the way, Lee Strasberg, Dream of Passion, I love that you have that. It's a great book, but I'll come back to that. But I was like, all right, let me take a look at that area. Let me see what that is. And I'm going through just, because when I'm in there, it's like you've seen it. It's like a mad lab. I'm just cutting back and forth. What do we do? Oh, like that. All right, hold that. All right. Grab that too, maybe. And then I see that line, and there was like a 1 frame separation between the last word and when he changed the tone to, I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to be alive. And I'm like, that's all I need. I need 1 frame ahead of that of silence. So I put that in there, and I saw it, and he goes into this thing, how he said, the way I took advantage of my anxiety is that all that shit, my anxiety, my depression, my post-traumatic stress, it's all with me, but they're in the car, and I'm driving. And it's this like turnaround that I mean, I get chills talking about it right now. It starts from this dark place of, I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to be alive. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And you see me, it was kind of perfect. Like in the clip, I like leaned up in the chair, like, whoa. And there's like a real, and he explains it. And it's such a powerful thing because he was explaining that he was taking control of those things that drove him to that point. They're still there. You can't get rid of them. You can't get rid of past experiences. But like, I'm going to take control of that shit. And I put the clip together. It was like 28, 29 seconds with a little cliffhanger at the end, because those used to be, you don't want to do that now, but they used to be the idea. But it had the payoff in there. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, what music am I going to put with this? And I started going through my library of, all right, let's try Yellow by Coldplay. How does that sound? I didn't want to die. I'm like, no, that's a little right vibe, wrong address, right? And then I tried probably 4 more songs. And then I thought, the way this flips, the way the camera flips with my little reactions and him, I'm like, it's like a piano note. Stick Runaway on there. And I shit you not, I take the Runaway file by Kanye. I cut it right to where the first note hits. So I want it to hit right when he says I. Ba, I, right? Like I on the same time as that. I dropped it on and I was just like, I like it switched perfectly, and then right when he paid it off, it dropped. And I went, oh my God. Like, what? Like I stepped back. I looked at the clock. It's like 3:02 p.m. This came together fast. I got home. I started working at like 1:15. And I'm like, I could get this out by 6. This needs to be right though. And I sat there, and of course today it would be terrible the way I edited it. I see all kinds of mistakes, but it was so perfect what he said. We put this clip out. This is before YouTube Shorts were like a few weeks before YouTube Shorts were a thing. So it was all TikTok at the time. Put it out on TikTok. It did 10 or 11 million views on TikTok, but that clip has been viewed hundreds of millions of times. Oh. Accounts still share it and get millions of views today. And he has had people from around the world reach out to him. Just the guy in there, have had people from around the world reach out to me saying things, and it's not being dramatic, where people send you long messages of things that I cannot believe they are entrusting me or Ashton, who they don't know, to hear, and saying, that attitude has changed my compass. I want to be here. I never thought of it that way. Ashton would take these long calls with people who were on the brink of suicide, crying their eyes. I mean, when you see that and you realize a 29-second clip of what someone else in my studio had the guts to share with me did that, there is a whoa feeling. And I talked about with Chris Antich, the CJ Morgan clip with Jim, which was probably peak for me because of that whole thing. I don't need to tell that story again, but I hadn't really told the Ashton one. When I sat back, though, and I knew that beat was there, I didn't have to touch it other than adjust the volume. I was like, the universe wanted this to happen. That's it. That's what Rick Rubin's talking about. And then I started noticing it over and over again. So that clip goes viral. Then I put out a couple Jim DiOrio clips that went nuclear because people love Jim, telling the story about the September 15th, 2001 raid on the Al-Qaeda guys. They went nuclear. And then I had an epiphany. I had a guy, John Borick, on my podcast, Emmy-winning sports anchor from Philly. And I had asked him in there what he loved the most about his job that he had done. And he said, I love telling stories. I love getting to the core of what it is and telling the story. And I remember watching that back because I put out the podcast end of July around the same time. And I'm like, stories. I go to my TikTok and I go to every clip that had done well. They're all a story. I went to every clip that did badly, or they're at least narrative driven. Every clip that did badly wasn't. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, Julian, you're a Steve Jobs historian. What the fuck is one of the first things he said? The storyteller rules the world. Eric Zuliger came in recently in my podcast, who has traveled to all these unrecognized countries around the world. And he's like, countries are just stories, bro. It's everything. Storytelling wins. And so I said, we're going to make stories. And then I had a story with Dill, the guy who did the Jordan Belfort song, where he was talking about a friend of his who was killed by police. He was like a kind of like libertarian type, had like a lot of weapons, and there was like a false tip, and they went in and they killed the guy.
Shit.
It's really fucked up.
Yeah.
And I edited in some B-roll. And I remember there was a comment on there where someone said, that edit is perfect. And now I'm like, that edit is shit. But back then I was like, ooh, wait a minute. We're telling stories. We had the music down at this point because I'm an audio-visual guy, and I'm like, let's add in the visuals. And then I remember I did a clip, the first one I ended up doing, on the Ukrainian power hacking thing from Russia, where Russia would hack into Ukraine's grids. This is before the war. This is 6 months before the war. Russia had been testing hacking into Ukraine's power grids over the past like 7 years, and people didn't know about this and what the consequences of that could be if that was done at scale. And so I had a clip where I was talking about that, and I had started to fuck around with more B-roll that week and was getting good at putting visuals like fever dreams on top of what was being said. I'm like, people are describing images. I'm going to give people those images, and I want to make it make sense. And so I edited. It took me like 8 hours to edit that one together. I'm like, I got to get this out. I got to get this out at 5:30. And I put it out, and I remember it was out for 40 minutes. It was already going viral. And I'm sitting on the bottom step. I'm about to take my dog out for a walk, and I got a text from you that said, yo, you sent the link to the clip, and you're like, I just watched this. I can tell this takes a really fucking long time, and that is probably annoying you. But you should keep doing this because this shit is fire. And I was like, God damn it, fuck. And from there on out, that's what I did, and that ended up building the podcast because I went viral on YouTube Shorts when that started to take off, and then kind of built that feed for podcasts. And I got better and better at it to the point I started doing it on the episodes. And every edit of every clip that's gone viral for me on YouTube is terrible to me now. They're all terrible. But at the time, they were like cutting edge. No one else was doing it. And they were like amazing for my capabilities at the time. And once I honed it in the episodes and I started working with 1920 by 1080 widescreen instead of vertical, that gave me some spacing work. You know, like, what's the art of this shot? How do I move it into the next shot? There was a clip going around social media a couple months ago of Marty Scorsese talking about how editing is the key to, it's just the most beautiful part of the art because you can completely change a scene on one frame. And I was very influenced by him and some other people, but, you know, I'm obsessive. I mean, Alessi's sitting over there. I'm obsessive about it. He knows. Mm-hmm. And he's gotten, like, great at editing now, too, with it, because he's seen me do this a million times to the point that, like, he'll laugh saying this, but he'll send me stuff now and I'll be like, yo, that's not the worst thing I've ever seen. You know, like, it's like, wow, it's, like, pretty good. But I sat in a studio in my parents' house for years doing nothing but...
I think that's part of your stubbornness too, if I'm being honest. Of like, you're always someone that want to do something right, or like, why do something if you're not doing it right, kind of guy. So I think part of it translates to like even you sticking the course and even doing it this long. Like that kind of translated well to like, okay, why am I going to wait this long, or why am I going to spend so much time on this clip? Because like every little detail matters.
I mean, I think it's the details, but it's also. It's a combination of your intuition that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and taking advantage of every opportunity you see. You know, I've made 2 big bets in the history of this podcast that are the only reason I'm sitting here. The first bet was no podcasts are taking shorts seriously. I'm going to take it seriously and be the best. We did that. That was great. The second bet was end of summer 2022. I started to realize I'm going to now take the time I'm spending on shorts. Like I kind of got to, once you do 2 clips back to back, like 26 million, 46 million, you're like, you can only go down from here, right?
Yeah.
And it was getting more saturated. I'm like, I'm now going to take those skills and I'm going to apply it to the episodes. And I'm going to edit the front of the episodes to sell the production of the episode like a movie. We won that bet. That really grew my show on the episode itself.
And can we talk about timelines here just so everyone has an understanding of how we're building this? So back in that post that you were talking about in July, so going back to Ashton.
Yeah.
You know, in July you were hovering around 2,000, and then you really started to blow up. You almost doubled
December
in a month.
Go look at December 1st or 3rd, 2021, and look what happens after that.
So December 1st, you're 50. Oh shit.
Yeah.
So here's the trajectory of what happens there, right? December 1st till 2021, 15K. December 8th, 23K. December 15th, 37K subscribers. December 22nd, 46K subscribers. And then to wrap off end of the year, 54K subscribers. So you literally had a growth even in that 1 month alone of around 40,000 subscribers. And 4X'd your following almost, basically in that 1 month.
Yeah, and that happened again at least one other time.
And what was the catalyst for that December
The shorts.
point? Oh,
the shorts
when they started.
I saw YouTube was really pushing shorts by late summer. In late summer 2021, they were pushing shorts. And they invited me into like a shorts pod, a creator community, where we'd all meet with like a YouTube person on Zoom, exchange ideas. And I could see, this was shortly after TikTok had officially surpassed YouTube for a minute in user average time spent per day on the app, which was like, whoa, holy shit. And now YouTube went, let's go. They could not get podcasts to make shorts, though, because it was ruining their algorithm. The good news is I had no algorithm to ruin. I didn't have an algorithm. I charted on Apple and Spotify on one of the subcharts, like August 2021. That's my focus was always on audio. YouTube was like, dump it there. There was no thought. But then I'm like, wait a second. I'm making these clips on TikTok. Let's make them. That's when I started doing my captions. I used to do my captions. I thought you had to do this at the beginning. Use TikTok's captions. So I'd have to caption it on there and learn to time it perfectly. Oh my God, bro. Oh my God. It was like, oh, I got to go caption a clip. Oh my God. And you're using fingers, like trying to get it. Oh, it's so hard. But then I'm like, no, we're going to caption it by my words now.
Did it make any difference at all trying to SEO caption it with TikTok's algorithm?
Yeah, because I knew I couldn't put any TikTok stuff on YouTube. They didn't want that.
Oh, that's
so I was never going to do that. It was going to be its own thing. And so I started posting August 2021, and one of my clips went a little bit viral. Got like 2 or 3 million. And I'm like, and I see the numbers. And this is when I was hottest on TikTok. Like everything. 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, everything. And I'm like,
and how many followers of TikTok did you have at that time? You remember?
I crossed 200,000 in August of that year. And I remember looking at this, and on YouTube the analytics were better, and I'd see, on TikTok an amazing clip would happen, you'd have 75% watch time, unreal, right? Because there's a lot of 14 to 18 year olds who are just fucking Marty's over there just clipping. On YouTube, you had more 23 to 28 year olds in the feed. So they have a longer attention span. And if you hit them with a good clip, I was seeing clips come in. Like I remember one with your brother that actually I was in a cold streak on TikTok, so it didn't do that well on TikTok, but it had 110% average watch time on YouTube. This is October 2021, which was a dark moment for me. Nothing was going right. And I'm looking at that. It's at 2,000 views on YouTube at 110% watch time. And I look at the last one and it's 105. And I'm like, how are these not going? These gotta go.
Yeah.
These gotta go. And I was hitting up Chris Giuseppini about it. Like, dude, when I already proved once when they sent my clip, it did 2 or 3 million and it had 108% watch time. That one in August that went. So I'm like, I've already proved myself. Why aren't they sending me? And he's like, they're gonna. And John Rondi was the guy. I was so frustrated. And I'm like, John, I've put out 260 videos and I can't get any traction. He goes, maybe it'll be number 261. And he was about a month off. But like December, I noticed the last week of November, the Lil Durk clip went like that. And I was like, oh, whoa. And I was getting some subs. And then December 1st, boo! Like that. I mean, we did 50 million views that month.
Crazy.
They started taking some of my old clips. Some of them, like Your Brothers, got lost on the battlefield. They didn't bring them back. But others they brought, that one only did like maybe 80,000, 90,000. But others they brought back and were doing millions. Ones that had done millions on TikTok too. I'm like, goddamn right. That should do millions. And everything I owned the feed. I owned the shorts feed until I basically stopped making shorts on YouTube at the end of summer 2022 because they took me 20 to 25 hours to make at that point. 15 on the low end if it was a shorter clip.
For how many per clip?
Per clip.
Yeah, that's insane.
Because I'm OCD.
And how much are you getting clips a week, like output-wise?
Averaging 1. I started doing them in tranches.
Averaging 1 a week.
Yeah, but they counted. I mean, I was averaging 4 million a clip.
So you're saying...
So I made them count.
When did you stop again? June?
I stopped basically August 2022. I put out 3 that were solid. They weren't amazing clips, but they were very well edited, and they did fine.
You had about 300K subscribers at that point.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And that's when I started making the intros for episodes, which took up my time. Because now those 25 hours were going to that.
Gotcha. And before we get to that point in the time, so up to this point in time now, like as you're making the clips, what did your output look like? Like how many long form contents were you getting out there per week?
1.
And then short form clips, like on average, how much do you think you're getting out there?
Over time, it got less and less because they took longer and longer.
Yeah.
So when we were in summer 2021, before the video, I was at that point, even with the music, I was getting 4 a week out, 4 to 5 a week. Gotcha. So, I mean, you remember July 4th, 2021, when you guys were down the shore with Adam and everyone's there. Yeah. And like you and Mitch would like come to check on me in my grandparents' house. You'd be at Meg's, Meg and Greg's, and you'd like come to check on me like, hey, how you doing, buddy? I'm like making another clip. I would just make them, but they took less time. They probably took, when it was the music time, because I'm obsessive with the music, I'd sit there, I'd test every song. I need it timed on the first beat because the initial hook's most important. It would still take 4 or 5 hours a clip, but then it got up to like 20 hours a clip by the next spring. I mean, there was one clip, it was one of the worst clips I ever made because I overthought it. I spent 35 hours on it. Can't do that. So I said, well, we're going to take that, we're going to move it to the episode, and we're going to hook people on the episode. And the first episode I did it for was episode 113 with Jim DiOrio. And I saw the watch time go up like 50 to 80% over the next 2 episodes. I was like, oh, I'm really going to do this every week, aren't I?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's my curse. Like when I find the better way, I have to do it. And so I did that until episode 164. That was the first time I handed one off to Alessi. He did a great job with that. And then I did episode 167, and I did a mini one for episode 171. And other than that, he's been doing them now. And he's not as OCD as me, thank God. So it takes him a little less time. But, when I made it, I mean, I look back, some of them, you'll always find better ways to do stuff, always. But like I'll look back on like a Michu Kaku intro for 145, like, whoa. Like, because I also know what went into that week and what was going on and how I didn't sleep for 4 days and had to cut together a mini documentary and that. And like how you want to talk about the universe falling right into place.
Are you talking about when Joe Rogan also
yeah, dude,
had an interview with him?
That's brutal. Got scooped by the goat. But it worked out. He didn't ask him about the Eric Weinstein thing, so I could sell that. It worked out great. But, there's edits like that I'm like, whoa. Like some of the James Fox ones, there's one Michael Caine cut in that I don't like. But this is how obsessive I was. I had to cast people. So like Chris Cathers, episode 136, 137, I think it was 130, 137. I'm like, I need to find an actor that looks like him. And they need to be in a setting that could pass as a guy in the military working special forces in the Middle East. Ben Foster. He fucking looks like him. Ben Foster wears a big bushy beard.
That's why you always do for like Jim DeOrio. You always use the guy from
Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad.
Because it's him. He's Hank. He's Hank. Like, he's the only recurring character over and over. I use him. I have to keep finding Hank clips to use every time, but he's fucking Hank.
It does help with the storytelling for
Yes.
sure. Yeah, because you don't want to take him.
But I gotta cast that, and so I like that's where I'm obsessed. Because when James Fox is telling the story about Colonel Bob Salas and the sighting of a UFO at a nuclear facility, and James is talking about Bob Salas and this is what he did for a role, and now I'm talking to him as an old man. It's not good enough for me to show a young man and an old man. I want the same actor, and I want him in 1080p. So I gotta go find Michael Caine, who looks like a perfect Bob Salas, in 1080p in fucking 1960 from a movie he was in, because his career's been that long, and find him in one recently where he's an old man sitting there talking like he's in an interview. And there's one cut on there because the camera angle, I like the eyes to go right into the eyes from one shot. If you're gonna jump cut into a shot, let's say we have someone at 100% size, and I'm gonna jump cut it to, let's make it simple, 200%, right? So they're bigger. So it cuts from boom to boom for like a punch you effect. I need the level of the eyes. Forget the face, forget all that. I need the eyes to come at the same part of the screen on the second cut.
Interesting. Is that like a trade secret?
Yeah. So with him, I mean, Alessi will tell you, we'll sit there on a Zoom and I'll put my two fingers on the left screen and we'll move the cursor like this. I'm like, are the eyes coming right in on that line, like an ocean wave hitting you? If it's not, it's no good. So one thing, Alessi, I got to work with you on that. We're gonna get that right. We're almost there. But it's
why do you think that makes such a big difference?
It's pleasing. It's pleasing. So there's a cut in episode 138 in like the 27-second part of that intro clip where it's Michael Caine for 4 cuts, because I cut it on it. It has to cut clean on a phrase too. So if I have a cut, let's say someone says, in 1936, and they say it at this speed, in 1936, there was a bomb. And the bomb was unknown to everyone except one man. How many cuts is that?
I don't know.
It's 4 phrases. In 1936, cut. There was a bomb. Cut. And he's speaking slowly enough, these can sit for a second, right? So you're catching, it's not like, and it was unknown to everyone. Cut.
So that's 4 B-roll clips.
Except one man.
There.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
So with Michael Caine, James had a 4. There's a Latin word for that. I can't think of it. He had a 4 line, four phraser.
I don't know
okay?
any Latin. Yeah.
I don't know any fucking Latin either. But he had a 4 phraser. And so the phrase started with, as a young man, I'm paraphrasing, it didn't say this. As a young man, Bob Salas actually served as a nuclear commander or whatever. And the funny thing is, I'm sitting there with him, and then I know it's going to drop to James's face because he did something dramatic. But I'm like, okay, when in that first part, I need a young Bob Salas. I need him looking like he's in a government building in a suit, like the whole bit. And I found it took me an hour. I found some Michael Caine movie, because I also will only use HD clips. Will not use something that's low P because it's not pleasing, right? I found some HD clip. Like the amount of times I have searched on the YouTube search bar in the last 3 years, no one's beaten me around the world. It's sick. But I found these clips of him in some spy movie where he's like walking through a hallway, and I'll move the camera so that you can kind of let it drag for a sec. And then I found a clip of him like yelling at his daughter as an old man in a movie, but you can't see the daughter, and it looks like he's in a 60 Minutes interview. It was Michael Caine. But the way they had the camera on the different cuts I had to use, one closer, one farther, they had his head, if this is the screen, they had the top of his head here on one, and they had the top of his head here on another. So I couldn't get it to where
Same
the
angle.
where the eyes weren't quite lined up, and it was too. James said the second phrase too fast. In hindsight, I would have done a long zoom there.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that there. So that was one mistake. But I look at the rest of that kind of edit. The way I did that edit is he's describing this phenomenon, these aliens that you can't see. You're just being told about them. So I took all these different movies that had blue light, and some of them I color corrected to get it to blue light. And I wanted the face of people seeing a blue light come on them. So it starts off with Mahershala Ali looking up into a blue light, eyes meeting you on the first phrase, on the first drop of the beat. Then it's Olivia Wilde looking up in an alien movie, up into a blue light, but you just see her face and you're seeing their reactions. And then eventually on another cut, it drops to Tom Cruise in War of the Worlds looking up. I changed the color to make it a little more blue at this light. And then James is talking about these reportings in Russia about seeing, landing at a military base or seeing a UFO come down. And I cut to a couple in Moscow, like turning like this from some movie. And then I cut to a little girl, camera's behind her, and she's looking into a giant blue light. And I never show it. And then when we get to the mid-roll, because I always had to drop the intros on a beat. It had to drop like the music's like da-na-na, 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 drops into something. And then I time it to the beat of the mid-roll and I make it move. I had the first one where you're at White Sands in New Mexico where there's been some sightings, and it kind of goes right into the light of the sun, and I changed the whole image to go like this. Like the image was still like that, but I made it go like that, like kind of like make a V into the sun. And then I had another one where you see Scarlett Johansson in the movie Lucy, where all the lights are coming in her face and the camera is tight around her face like this, and the music was very chaotic. So the music was like dun, 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 and all these lights that are just all around, like flashing over her face. It feels like a rave. It feels like you and Marquis, right? Everything's just fucking like going. And then I had there was a moving camera shot where the cameraman in the movie is holding the cam and running, so it's moving all over the place, of William Dafoe in the Van Gogh movie running towards something up in the sky, and you just see it's like a chaotic thing drops in between each of these. There's like a drop into the guest and the number of the episode, the support on Patreon, whatever the block was. And then the way I wanted to close it was you see an alien body, the outline of what's clearly an alien body, because they've been talking about the phenomenon this whole time, and it's moving up as the beat is about to drop into the face of the alien, and right when it gets to the face, boom, drops into the episode. And when you see that like come full circle by the end of a 20-something hour edit like that, you're like, people don't even know the story that just got told, but they're built into that mystery because they don't know it's a mystery. Like they don't know that I did that until I say that. Hey, they all looked into a blue light. You have to have Roger Ebert go back later and like break it down in the film review, right? Yeah. But people know. It's like a subconscious thing. And it sets the tone. So when I started I got the cadence of those things officially. Episode 138, that was the first one where I had from episode 113 to 120, I was playing with, having highlight clips. I didn't like that. At 121 with Boziak, I started with just picking one story in there and starting with that.
By highlight clips, you mean like teasers?
Teasers that had different, I don't like that. There were a couple I was proud of. The edits at the time were good. Brian McMonagle, 115, Ryan Tate, 117. They were clean. But it's not as engaging because it's all different things. You can't get locked in. But then when you just tell a 35-second story that makes people go, I need to know more. It's one thing. It's simple. And at 138, I had the cadence of how I got to the mid-roll all figured out. And every edit after that, I'm proud of them. They're there.
One thing that you told me that always stuck out to me on the content side was around how you want to take people away from them looking at a phone. Like they basically forget that they're even looking at a phone. They're looking at a computer and whatnot. Yeah. And it's clear, like by the amount of work you just painted the picture of how you went through that process specifically, right, for one of those intros. Now imagine that tenfold that you've done for everything else. So I guess question for you then: what would be a middle ground for someone else? Like it can make sense now that you have a big following. It's easy to put a lot of time because a lot of people are watching it. But what's a good middle ground for someone that's maybe just starting out? And how much time do they have to spend on this shit? how much is volume versus quality? You know what I mean? Because you could spend 30 hours on a clip, but if you have no followers and that one just ends up tanking, yeah, that can be pretty discouraging to get like 10 views on TikTok and, and shorts from that one video. But because you don't see the long game picture yet because you're so brand new to it.
Alessi, could you come over here real fast? He was just talking about this yesterday. He has some great thoughts on this. We were going over the whole how the fuck you would break through a podcast today versus when we were doing it, and there's like so many out there. And you were saying, what were you saying exactly? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying how I think now, because the market is so saturated, we said like, a few years ago, there was like Vine way early on. You can make any video and go viral, right? It just happened. Those were the Logan Pauls, those people. And then, that had been going on for a while, and then shorts were introduced. And if you started making good shorts, you could blow up there. But now shorts are so saturated, it's nearly impossible to get a short to get you to where you want to be viral. Like, so many shorts are just going off that Julian and I were discussing, being like, look, you can't use really shorts to elevate you to that level. That now it looks like you kind of have to know people in the space to get that climb up. Like, to just start from nothing and use shorts and videos, you're going to be probably the 0.1%.
Damn.
Just because it's so difficult now. Like, if you wanted to put out like 10-minute videos every day and they were the highest quality, the algorithm is so strange that it will be very hard for it to be pushed. And if it does, it has to be that one that is your best one. If not, you're done.
Yeah.
And that's just so hard.
Even that won't, it's hard.
So now it's like, who do you know in the space and who's going to get you there? You look at all the podcasts now, like, I hate using Rogan, but he's a great example. Every single other big podcast is because of Rogan. Andrew Huberman, Lex Friedman, Cameron Haynes. All these big podcasts are one-off. Andrew Schultz.
Are you saying because they went on the show? Are you saying because they got clout?
They're all clout because of him.
Yeah. And
it's not like like a shot at them by any means. Like,
no.
They're there because they're big, but it's also because it's the Rogan effect, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like when I look back on it, the movies were like, the world's ending and the hero always runs for like the last cliff before everything drops, and somehow they catch it and everyone behind them, they fall down into the cliff and they're all dead. That's what I feel like sometimes. I feel like when I got shorts right when I did, I grabbed that cliff and I lived to fight another day. And then when I got to the intros of the episodes right when I did, I grabbed that cliff and lived to fight another day. And now I'm not going to talk about it, but there's another bet I'm making right now. It's the third bet. I think things come in threes, and I think if I'm accurate, I've been good on the first two for two, so knock on wood. If I'm accurate on this next one, I think we'll be there.
What's the third bet
I'm not going to talk about it. And I hate saying, I just don't, it stresses me out. Like, when I'm talking with people about how to break through with a podcast today, I'm like, I don't know.
Anyone you'll talk to, and I think it's funny that John Rodney told you that, it's the 261st clip or whatever, because that's really how it works, right? If you just like post with consistency, you're eventually going to get one that's a banger, and then there's going to be a bunch of duds, and that's going to be the same repetitive thing over and over again. And that's honestly how I got to 50K followers here on this one. I had like 2 bangers that actually propelled me there, and then the rest of them not even close to that. Right. You know what I mean? But it took me, I didn't even get those bangers until posting like 60 to 90 times. And I got lucky at that point.
You also, though, are a successful guy with monetary resources that you've earned for yourself. You have resources behind you that you've earned for yourself, which is amazing. But when you look at the podcast market, there's really 4 lanes. Lane 4 are the niche guys. The best example of this is Huberman. He's also the rarest example. He's huge. Because people are so interested in his topic that he makes a fuck ton of money on it. Most niche guys, though, are more, people like them as guests on other podcasts, and they can go back to the niche to listen to it because that person does a podcast, and that person gets a lot of deals through their credibility. They have one expertise that they talk on. Maybe this is not as good of an example now because Andy Bustamante has a great podcast at this point that's growing. But for a while, he was your perfect niche podcaster. He was doing audio only, making a little bit of money on it, like almost nothing. But he was propelling himself because he's a former CIA spy to go on all these other shows, and his business behind it was making a fuck ton of money. Like, he killed it. And now he's even taking the podcast seriously, but he's so big, I think he's on his way to breaking through on that. But a lot of guys, they don't necessarily break through where that's their income source. The third line is successful at something else, invested unlimited resources and connections into what they do. The best example of this is Patrick Bet-David. The guy made a fuck ton of money in his previous career, wanted to get into content, spent millions of dollars on having the best shit, used all his money and connections, and I'm giving him a compliment here, by the way, I'm not slighting him at all. Used all his money and connections to build that base, and the guy's a machine. He puts out a lot of content. Grew it all, grew his valuetainment channel, grew into the PBD podcast, like, made it. The second lane is the Rogan Cinematic Universe. It's all comedians and scientists who are friends or similar of the like, who are friends with him, who got big through him, and now all have podcasts. That, so far, in case you haven't noticed, none of these lanes are relevant to me.
Yeah.
The first lane was the most shocking part of the podcast industry to me. So ironically, for all the connections I had and the giant Rolodex of relationships I had going into this, one place where I had no connections was in podcasting, which is hilarious. Still have very few connections in this space, which is kind of sad, to be honest with you. At this point, that's not my fault. I'll put it that way. But, one of the things I learned is, like, there is no New York podcast scene. You would think, like, everything's in New York, right?
Yeah.
There's no podcast industry here. Barstool has their thing that's totally different.
Yeah, that was the only one I was going to point out. It's more of,
Flagrant is huge. Emily Ratajkowski has a podcast. There's others that I'm not naming. There's no base here. The entire podcast industry is in LA. And that industry wants people who were already blowing up online for something else. They want influencers. They want Hollywood stars. They want people with clout. That's what they want. The fifth lane, which really almost doesn't exist at this point, is the lane that, like, I'm in. And to an extent, my boy Danny Jones, who has an amazing podcast, Danny Jones podcast, used to be called Concrete. He's in it too, but Danny is kind of in the self-made Patrick Bet-David lane because he was very successful before he did the podcast.
See that. Yeah,
like, he's a humble guy, but the guy's a brilliant movie maker and cinematographer. He did music. He's the best evaluator of talent in this industry by far. He knows people are going to blow up before they do. So he invested his money, and he already had a base on YouTube, into YouTube. So he kind of straddles the two lanes because he is very much on his own. He's done it his goddamn self, right? So I still put him in my lane a little bit. The difference was I had $0 in my parents' house, right? But that lane, go through the top 1,000 podcasts. It don't exist, bro. People who I had zero following, zero credibility, zero real online presence. I think I had 700 friends on Instagram or 800, whatever. Maybe it was like 1,000. Whatever it was low. No brand. And I started a podcast. It's hard to do that. And I see people trying to break through in that way. And that's why I think, unfortunately, Alessi's advice is mostly sound. Because people who don't, like, you would be if this thing is huge in a couple of years, you would be in the same seat as Danny Jones, straddling those two things. Because, like, you are a very successful guy. You have had an amazing career. You're 28 years old, and your career's already incredible, right? Like, you've earned that yourself. Look at the office we're sitting in, down the street from your amazing apartment, too, that you have bought with your own money, right? Guys who just say, I'm going to put all the eggs in the basket and do this, there's not many. I think that's sad because I think that's how podcasting was supposed to be built. Supposed to be getting around, having to go through the powers that be. But the longer I'm in the industry, the more I realize it's very much in the hands of the wheelers and dealers, which doesn't have to be a bad thing.
One can almost say that it sounds like that you actually don't even recommend getting into the podcast from what you know now, knowing how hard it is.
Let me be careful how I say this. I'm never going to tell someone not to go after what they want to do. And when they do, if they're a good person, I will help them however I can. I'm rooting for them, and some people will make it. But if you're asking me, would I recommend in 2024 getting into podcasting? Would I recommend it? No, I wouldn't have recommended it in 2020. I said, of all the stupid things I've ever done, there's nothing stupider than selling off my life and starting a podcast. This is the dumbest. I'm like, you've done some dumb shit, Julian. This is the dumbest shit. I thought it was dumb then. What do you think I think now? And I'm a realist about that. So if you're out there and you're listening and you have a dream and you want to start a podcast, do it. Don't listen to me and be like, oh, I don't want to do it. Like, if you're a dog and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to find a way, do it. But
maybe don't quit your job for it is what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, that's, I had a conversation with someone recently about that. And
unless
I said,
you're as wide as you are, unless you're as meticulous as you are.
Well, I had a conversation with someone recently where I said, if it were me today, I'd have a different strategy on this.
Based on what you know, or are you
Based on
saying,
what I
okay,
know.
based on what you know?
Which maybe I wouldn't know that going in, and I'd be like, fuck it, because I go in eyes wide shut. But if I had some information and could study it, I would build it on the side. It wouldn't be. There will, you know what? There's always going to be an opportunity. There's always going to be something. I mean, the thing I'm about to bet on is something. But I don't know if you could cut the line to get to the thing I'm about to bet on.
You cut the line by...
Like, think about what I bet on first. It was the lowest rung on the totem pole, is short clips from the podcast. Can't go lower. It's fucking 30 seconds. Right? On a phone. This is the lowest hanging fruit there is. What I'm thinking in my head, though, is very high hanging fruit. It wouldn't have been feasible to try it 2 years ago.
Okay.
I'm about to invest. We're trying to find the money to invest in what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's not there right now. I'm on the phone with Nate today, going through this, trying to figure out, well, if we got this, can I put that? Oh, okay.
Nate, your agent?
Yeah. And it's like, we're trying to find, even at my point, those numbers are just numbers on a page. My aunt sent me a screenshot the other day. I got to pull this up. This was funny as fuck. Sent me a screenshot.
Which aunt was it?
My Aunt Mary sent me a screenshot of a Google that said, how much money does Julian Dorey make from YouTube? And it says, below is an estimated average earnings from advertising on the channel, depending on language, price, and current audience. Daily, $9,601. Weekly, $67,395. Yearly, $3.5 million. I texted her back. I said, LMAO, if you can find that money, please send it my way immediately. All the estimates you see online of what people make, take them with a huge grain of salt. Maybe some of them are right. I can tell you that's not, you looked at my numbers. That's not right. If I were making that, we wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Yeah.
I'd be setting you up and I'd be buying your studio for you and spending ad money to fucking make you the biggest podcast in the world.
Yeah. We're running out
and getting you way better guests than me. Yeah. Remember, I still got to make good on that promise. When we were fucked up at 5 a.m. in November 2021, and I told that bouncer, next time I'm here, I'm buying the place. Yeah. And he was like a Russian guy. He's like, I bet you will. I'm like, thanks, man. Got COVID. Anyway, but, it's not that. Not even remotely close.
Yeah. And you reinvest, take that aside. You reinvest everything into the business. Yeah.
I don't, I am starting to think about life a little bit because I feel like I've earned the right. I had a really good life before this.
Yeah.
I worked hard, don't get me wrong, but we know how to have a good time. We know how to do both.
And 3 years doing this in your 20s at your parents?
4 years.
For 4 years. Or being at your parents, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It was 3.5 of my parents and now almost a half a year here.
Yeah.
It's
a lot of fucking time.
It's a lot of time.
In your 20s.
In my 20s. And I know it's worth it. That was the thing. In the months before even knowing I was going to do this, I don't get to be as much these days because I'm working all the time, but I love reading, right? I love reading stuff. I fall asleep every night with the Kindle on my face, 4 pages in at 2:30 in the morning because that's the only time I could read. And the next day I'm like, fuck, I did it again. But all these guys you read about, you pick any business, you pick any profession, you pick whatever it is. Almost to a man, all of them had years like this. You can't really, even the people who did it young, you know, it's very rare you get to be like Justin Bieber or something. And Justin Bieber, by the way, worked his ass off before and after blowing up.
I love Justin Bieber.
I love Justin Bieber, right? But like he has the voice of an angel, right? And he had the look of like the young skater boy. Like he had it. So he got it young enough that which actually has a lot of downside to it too. So there's a price no matter what you do. I'm like proud of how that guy handles himself these days because he has every reason to be dead right now with all the bullshit that got thrown his way. But you know, when you're going after things in your 20s, it's lean, man. It's lean. I remember when you were reading Elon Musk's like biography or something.
Yeah,
is that right? Yeah.
SpaceX
And you were walking me through that, and like the things. I don't know if that book is here on the shelf.
It's not on the shelf. I gave it to someone.
Oh, but he, you know, I remember you talking about that, and I mean that guy still lives a tortured life. I have no interest in that.
Yeah, me neither.
But you know, you want to do special shit. It's like Larry would say to me. Anything worth doing ain't easy. It's what it is, where everyone would do it. And so I accept that, but I mean, I miss going to the club. I love the club. I mean, you know, every time I go there now, I look like a kid in fucking Toys R Us.
Yeah.
You know, it's like special when I go, but I'm looking forward to doing that stuff again.
Yeah.
Entertaining people, having a fun life, good balance. You know, you got to earn it.
Yeah.
And I'm getting close. I got to be careful. There's a lot of distractions up here.
Yeah,
You know
because you're running into the point of the problems that you're running into now. We talked about this a little bit, but your problems are way different than when you started. Your problems are like scaling problems. So part of it's like you're fortunate to be in the position you're in, but at the same time, it's like not any less easier,
yeah.
or it's not any more easier
No.
at this point because it's the next problem. So it's like,
Yeah, you always are finding new things, especially when you're OCD like me. You're always finding a better way to do things and new things. And so it gets harder and harder.
well, how do you think then where you're at now? So, almost at 600K subscribers on YouTube. Like, what do you think is going to take you to the next level?
I need one big break.
And by big break, like,
I don't know what that is. I need one. I've never thought that before. But in the past couple months, because we went through a dark time in the fall here, I think, knock on wood, we have it figured out. But it was the last 4 months of 2023 was the most challenging time of doing this.
and I don't know if it's up to you. Like, I didn't know if I was allowed to bring that up or not, just because.
Yeah. I'm not going to get into
cool.
the. I mean, it's not that exciting, but nothing bad happened. It's just the business had some difficulties. And shout out Chris Giuseppini. I think he figured it out because I couldn't. I was like Charlie, and It's Always Sunny every night, going through numbers and lists. Like, it's gotta be this. And then one night he was like, "Holy shit, bro! I think I got it." And he got it. Like, he got it. And so now we gotta see if we can fix that. I'm being very cagey about it, but it's just not stuff. It's not stuff you can really. First of all, people wouldn't even understand it if I explained it to them, and it's nothing. What's the word? It's nothing suspicious or anything like that. It's actually insanely stupid and simple. But
I don't know who could hear it and get it. Like,
it's just not.
Yeah.
I wish I could like explain it, but there is a very specific reason I cannot explain it.
I feel you. Yeah.
Right. But, you know, in those months, I've had some dark moments, but I've also seen some cool silver linings. And I've seen how bought in. You know, to me, it was always, I mean, you know what it was. People walk into my studio, we sit down and hit record on the camera. I upload it to the internet. It's just a number on a page. I didn't actually think there's like real fans of this thing, but there are real fans of this thing. Just wild to me. And I'm seeing that. And so I know, based on some of the amazing people that we have around this thing who are supporting it and I guess enjoying the content too. I don't know why. but I just feel it in my bones. I don't know what it is. No idea. But I need one break. I get one break, it's a wrap. And I think you have to, that's the thing. You can't sit around and say, oh, hit me with a break. Let's hope. Come on, light, fall on me, right? Like, you can't, you have to keep pushing yourself in that direction. That's why I'm making the bet I'm making right now. Because I think if I make that bet and I make it correctly and it's expensive and it's, you know, what it is, I think it's going to create that break.
And you don't have to get into that big bet specifically if that's not something you want to get into. But when you think about the amount of content now that you want to produce, like the type of guests you're getting on.
Oh, that's another thing we're doing. That I can talk about.
Two a week, right, is what you're looking at?
Yeah, that I can talk about. That's not what I'm talking about, but that's, yeah. I mean, that's going to help because it's just, it gives more options for us to produce things. It gives more, you know, I used to be a poker player. You always wanted the most outs in the deck you could get. Mm-hmm. If you're getting to that turn and you only have 2 outs and, you know, there's a bet for 1/10 of your stack, you got to fold those cards. But if you can find yourself 8 or 9 outs or even 6 outs, you may pay to see that river.
And you were always flying, even back when you first started, you were actually like even flying people out, getting in the hotel, picking them up from the airport literally when you needed to.
Not at the very beginning. For the first 86 episodes, I invited in people with a functioning mouth who lived in range.
Yeah.
I mean, on the podcast we've had before we moved up to Hoboken, which was like episode 163-ish. You know, I think we had like 65, 70 people from New York come down, which is really cool. Because that, you know,
that's so far.
Yeah, it was
that's
a 2-hour day,
yeah.
2-hour drive to get down there. But I started, Danny Jones is the guy who even put that in my head, and thank God he did, because I thought he was fucking crazy when he said that. But he's like, yeah, I'll just fly in. I'm like, you'll do what? Because he invited me on his podcast when we met. He's like, yeah, I'll get your flight right now. I'm like, is that what you do? Like, you fly people in? He's like, yeah, man, every week. I'm like, how the fuck? I remember he put me on the phone with Matt Cox, and I'm like, when I can afford it, Mr. Cox, I'll bring you. Matt's like, who the fuck is this guy? Yeah. And then like the next week, I'm like, fuck it, Matt, I got you. I found out flights are less expensive than I thought. We got you one. Same day, bro, morning, night. That was my trick. I'd get him out. We would shirk the hotel. We'd get him in. I'd bring people in on 6 a.m. flights and shit and just hand them coffee at the door. Send them out at 8 o'clock, and I'd drive them to the airport using my mom's car. And we just pick them up and do it. And that was the first one. Well, so Raj Rajaratnam was the first big break, episode 87. I really fucked up that episode, but he's amazing, and he did a great job.
You're talking about the Wall Street?
Yeah. The next episode I do with him, which I will wait to do, it's going to be great.
Oh, is he done?
I'll be way better. He's awesome.
Dude, so before you even had him on the show, that's why I got really excited about it, because there was a documentary, sort of like a documentary that came out, and because I guess he just got out of jail, so he was like talking about how he was innocent.
Yeah.
From everything that happened there. But yeah, once you had him on, I'm like, that's also when I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, that was a big, and he came down from New York City to do it, so he didn't have to fly. But then my friend Mark, who became my friend because he reached out to me to talk about doing that one because he's friends with Raj. He said, hey, I got a buddy, he'll come in from Florida. This is before I knew Danny Jones. And I'm like, oh, is he okay coming? He's like, yeah, he comes up here once in a while, and then we'll bring him down from New York. And that was Big Dan for number 93. We set that up, and he was like the first guy. I had other people fly there because they were in town who were friends, right? Yeah. And they were coming back to town. Like Kevin Gallagher, I guess, flew there for episode 31. But you know what I mean? It was like a convenience thing. But 92 was a big one because I cold called. I really have never had to do that. I think that was the only cold call I ever made in the history of the podcast. But someone gave me the idea to bring in David Satter, who's the only man who has ever been kicked out of both the Soviet Union and Russia, post-Soviet Union, as a journalist. Putin hates him. Great guy. So I found his number online. I'm like, this guy's not going to answer. And I call him up, and he goes, hello? And I said, hey, David, how you doing? And he's like, I'm good. And he wasn't like, fuck you. And I'm like, you don't know me, but my name's Julian Dorey. I have a YouTube channel with X number of subscribers, and people have been begging for me to bring you on the podcast. I'd love to get you in the studio to do it. What do you think? And he goes, there's like a long pause. He's like, well, I'm in Paris right now, but I could get home for that. And I'm like, what an idiot. I'm like, yeah, no. And now I'm like, well, we're not going to pay for this flight. So how are we getting out of this? I'm like, yeah, you want to, I mean, I'll make it work for you. Whenever you're flying in, you let me know. And he goes, I you know what? I could get a flight for Monday and do something in New York on where you said you're in Philly. I said, yeah, I'm like right outside Philly. And I'm like, maybe you can catch a train from New York. He goes, I think that'll work. He's like, send me an email. And I'm like, hanging up. David, I'll see you on Wednesday. Greatest guy ever. He's been on twice. It's my guy. Like, just awesome dude. He's lived an unbelievable life, man. We're going to bring his son on, too, I think. Provided he works for a huge media company, though, so he has to get permission to come on to tell the story that he reported on. It's, like, very legally touchy. So, yeah. Provided that gets through, we'll bring his son on, who's doing amazing work. But, yeah, David, that was a guy who came there. And then the first guy I flew there, booked the tickets, was 96, Matt Cox. 97, Andy Bustamante, I did it again. And then I started doing it a lot. And I mean, we've had people fly in from other countries.
And where are you getting the money for that?
I've never paid for an international flight. Those ones we've worked out where people have a reason to come back.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah,
that's kind of unreasonable.
I still couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a couple flights that got up there, and it's like, well, fuck it. I hope it works. You know, I've dropped 4 figures on travel.
To me, that's always been an interesting concept because even now it feels to me that you could still get people to come in without you even having to get their flight, because it's kind of, I don't want to use the word quid pro quo, but it is a little bit in the sense of, hey, they have beneficial gain of coming on as well.
Right. It's easier in New York because people have a reason to be here.
True. Versus
that makes it easier.
Yeah.
So we've had some good luck. I've paid for some so far, but other people have like been here.
Yeah.
Or a few people have come in and live here. So pop on fucking, you know. I got 2 guys coming in 2 weeks who live here, and they're big time, like, in their field.
And as you get bigger, you're not going to have to, like, people are going to want to be.
Right. But there's something I have found out, because, like, Danny said it so matter of fact, and he and I, it's one of my best friends. I talk with him every day. He and I do the same thing, and he's in Tampa. He really has to fly people in. No one has a fucking reason to go to Tampa. It's like, poor guy, it's like pulling teeth to get people to come there. But, you know, I'm flying people in on like 36F Frontier, and he'll have someone call up going, my back has sciatica. Can you get me first class from Singapore? He's dropping like $5K on.
Holy shit, he is?
And I'm like,
wow.
Well, I mean, he's rich, but still. Like, he's like, God damn it, fuck. And he's like, any luck with your people? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, what did set you back? I'm like, that doesn't matter. It was a lot.
Dude, bro, I'm surprised he's even having trouble with it, because I would assume that his podcast is pretty big.
He's incredible. Too. He's incredible. He's still so underrated, but people just don't have a reason to go to Tampa. There's something about, even when I was in Philly, there's something, we've determined this. There's something mental in people's heads where they go, first of all, I try to get them same day, so it's in, out, right? And secondly, they're like, oh, Philly, that's close to New York. And they feel like it's in the middle of shit, so they'll go there. Then I pull them up to Bumblefuck Mullica Hill. They're like, where the fuck are we? But with Tampa, it's like not near anything. They're like, Tampa, what the fuck am I? There's like a mental thing there. So I've been trying to make them, instead of Tampa Danny Jones, Fort Lickerdale Danny Jones, but still no bites on that.
So hopping to New York, they really just helped you out with the guests too. Just
yes,
making your
New
life
York is
so
a
much easier.
huge hack. Huge hack, I think. I mean, it's early, but we have to do a better job of, by we, I mean me, of identifying people who are here. It's like weird, like Googling, like people in New York.
Well, how do you know which guests to search for too? Because even
Dude, it's K. I mean, I don't know if you heard it because you and Marty were having a meeting earlier, but Alessi and I are sitting here like making the list of I let my interests guide me.
Are you asking other people to like recommend people, or are you literally trying to look at Google
sometimes
yourself?
For a long time, in the first 165 episodes, I think I had 4 cold reach outs.
Wow.
Everything else was like people call me up like, yo, would you want to talk to so-and-so? It's my boy. Or like, you know, I'd get in places. Like Michio Kaku happened because I built relationships at Penguin Random House. And then they sent him to me. And they're like, yo, he wants to be on the show.
Oh.
It's like, oh, really? Wow. And I don't know. It's just like, that's where the universe falling into place thing comes in again. It's like some things just seem to fall into line and it makes no fucking sense. But
Yeah. What,
voila.
so when you started outbounding, how many like was it already easy at that point? Did you wait till you could, I guess? is
Yeah.
what
I
you
mean, I
meant?
waited
Yeah.
till Danny Jones was like, what the fuck you mean you don't fly in people? And I'm looking at my bank account that has like, at that point, $3,000 in it. And he's thinking I'm rich too because he sees I have hundreds of millions of views
killing it,
online. And I'm
yeah.
like, no. And, you know, it happened. I remember my mom was like so nervous about it. She's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're flying people in. And she didn't know the prices I was paying too. I was like, oh, it was only $100. Another zero there, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, the first big bet I made was with Bustamante. He had lived in St. Pete, Tampa. And so when we got connected, Danny was like, yo, I need you to talk to Boost. Like, it'll be a great podcast. And this was a very, I guess, like telling call because he went to Mars after that. But Boost had lived in St. Pete and hadn't told Danny because, you know, he's a spook. So he moves from spot to spot and doesn't tell people that he moved across the state to Jacksonville. And so Boost and me get on the phone. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, I'll send you flights. All right, we're all good? Yeah, 100%. I'm excited to do this, Julian. I'm like, wow, we're going to talk to a real life spook. So I go on, I send him the flights to Tampa. He calls me back. He goes, oh, brother, I'm so sorry. I moved to Jacksonville, so send me flights from Jacksonville. I'm like, okay, no problem. Hang up the phone. I'm thinking Jacksonville. Same as Tampa. It's right across the state. Jacksonville's not a connector airport. So I look at the flight, and I'm like, this is at least a quarter of my net worth. Maybe
shit.
half of it.
The flight was that much from
Yeah,
Jacksonville?
like everything all in was going to be like $1,100.
Wow.
I sat back and I'm like, this guy is really well spoken. He literally was an undercover spy. I knew where he was an undercover spy as well, which he's going to be able to say that publicly soon, but I still can't say that. I loved his podcasts with Danny that he had done. That's really the only podcast he'd ever done.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and now this is when I'm at my peak on YouTube owning the feed. And I'm like, if I bring this guy in for a few hours, am I going to do some nuclear shit? And I was like, yes. And we did. Because he did fucking 200 million views on the 7 clips or whatever. It wasn't 200. It was like 120 million on YouTube. And
Yeah. If you talk about big bets, I mean, that shit went nuclear.
Yeah, it worked. And I spent, dude, the amount. I know every bit and piece of Andy Bustamante's body language and his tone and everything. It's the amount of time I spent editing that man. And Jim DiOrio as well. Like there's a few, Paul Rosalie. I know what their hands are going to do before they do it. I know what the volume, it's sick. It's sick. Because when I do these edits, the number of times I'm hearing the same lines back,
Yeah.
it's disgusting. So like, it's almost weird because then, you know, we're like friends. And I'm like hanging out with them and I'm like, all right, just don't guess what they're going to, you know what I mean? And you can't like, I want to be clear. It's not like you can guess exactly what they're going to say, but how they're going to make a point. I could almost sit there and mime them ahead of time, but they'd be real freaked out if I did that. And Andy, there's a hack for people. When you have a physical talker on your podcast, that's good for you. People respond to that. Andy,
What do you
Andy
mean?
and
What do you mean by
Paul
physical
are
talker?
Physical talkers. They're as physical as I am. Like I'm from Jersey. I fucking talk with my hands all the time, right? I move all over the place. I'm fidgety as fuck, right? They're just like that. Like I knew when Paul was going on Joe Rogan, I'm like, he's gonna end up blocking the fucking camera. What do you know? You see Joe's camera with Paul's head in it, and I'm like, so predictable. Like Paul will be here, and I'll be, but you don't even know. And then he'll like lean back and be like, this was the best thing. And I mean, look at the real estate that I'm covering. Andy, every time I cut to Andy, this is another editing trick. Like I did in in the last episode we did with Matt Cox, number 178, there's a point where we talk, I think, 38 minutes in about Bustamante, because Matt was the first guy to ever meet Bustamante. He's the reason he went on Danny's show, the whole bit. Matt was doing research for a book he was writing about a guy he was in prison with, who was a schizophrenic billionaire lawyer who believed he was 5'3", so he had like little man syndrome, and he believed that God whispered in his ear when he was 9 years old that he was going to be emperor of the world. And so he became a billionaire as a lawyer because he was a genius, and then hired a private military to try to overtake the Democratic Republic of Congo.
The fuck?
Naturally, that got every three-letter agency involved when that happened. He got drugged and thrown into prison. And so Matt was doing research for it, and he needed a spook. And so he called up a buddy. He's like, well, I got 3. And you want a CIA spook? You want an NSA spook? What do you want? And he goes, give me the CIA guy. And it was Andy.
Oh.
And so, you know, when I introduced that part in the podcast, I wanted to flash his face on the screen for a second to overtake it. So like I flashed it. He does moves like this all the time, or like that. So I flash it like as his face is going like that. So I go, I'm in the podcast. I'm like, and you were the guy who was the key to meeting Andy Bustamante, as it says, Andy Bustamante. And then it cuts back because like when I do the sub button throughout the episode, like 10 minutes in, I'll have it flash on the screen, the little graphic, 40 minutes in, 128 in, 215 in. I will have it flash where Andy's hands are. So like if he's doing one of these, like it'll flash subscribe where his hand is, subscribe. Paul Rosalie, same, like he'll do one of these and like it'll, and I'll go to that spot. I go to the same spots every time, and there'll be one right there because they talk with their hands so much.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're from, well, Paul is Sicilian, but like, you know, it's like, abida-boo-da-ba, you know, like they're all over the place. But I was like, this guy, he's done some wild shit. He's talking about a topic that is not covered enough online. He's probably still active. And he looks like Colin Kaepernick. If I can't make this go, I don't belong doing this. And I hit the button and bought the ticket. I said, no problem, Andy. Jacksonville's good. He's like, thanks, brother. And then that made everything.
That's fucking crazy. Yeah.
It made everything, man.
What does revenue for podcasts even look like? Because this is not even a podcast I'm even trying to monetize at all. It's more of like, I just kind of want to do this for fun.
I don't even know, bro. I'm the worst guy to ask that. I'm like, they're teaching me how to be better with money.
Well, did your agent help you?
Well, he's a huge help now. He's new.
So, like,
right?
When you think about most of your money coming from, is it coming from
It was
YouTube,
all from AdSense on YouTube and a little bit of Spotify.
Damn, YouTube pays well.
No, it doesn't.
That's well, you just see like that's
Mike. I moved out of my
good.
parents' house 4 months ago. It doesn't pay that well.
Well, that's because now recently. Well, yeah, I guess
I did my first brand deal in August, the end of July, 2023. That's disgusting.
But were you actively looking, or were you just focused on your content at the time?
Because I'm one guy, and
that's
I
what
look
I'm
at what
saying,
I'm, you know, and like, agent's been awesome. Nate's amazing, and Lindsay over there at WME, like they're fucking incredible. And you know, I was very skeptical of some of that stuff, but like reached out to me at the right time, and then I had Alessi sit in on like the first call I did with him. How'd that sound to you? He's like, actually, not bad. And I was like, okay. And then we went back and forth for like 8 weeks. I'd call this guy at like 3 a.m. in the morning just to see if he'd answer. He fucking answered every time, you know? And like, they're so supportive. I send an email, it's answered in like 30 seconds.
Wow.
I mean, like on Christmas.
But when you think about steady salary, you could just like throw that out the door because it's like a variable
My
every
income
month.
has gone like, I wish, if someone out there can tell me how to do this, I will do it. Send me to cross the Sahara, go to fucking wherever. We'll part the Red Sea. We'll do it. But, you know, like Alessi's over there working on some merch stuff right now and doing it. Because I'm like, show me how. I don't know how. Like, he's like, I got it. I got a plan. I'm like, done. Yours. You know, it's huge. Like, it's been great having him. Because I didn't have that for forever. And then when I brought him on, you get fresh ideas. He can put up with me, which he deserves a Medal of Honor for that. And, you know, it can take, as you keep adding to the plate, a plate only fills so much.
Yeah.
So you got to make a decision. Am I going to dump off the mashed potatoes, mac and cheese? It's all good, but you don't want to put it in the trash. So give it to another human being to eat. And he's eating it.
If I could kind of generalize here in a sense, it sounds like from your journey and perspective, you took the approach of the, what do they call someone with 1,000 hours when you work on something for
10,000 hours.
10,000 hours, sorry.
Yeah.
Craftsman.
Yep.
You took the craftsman approach, which enabled you to scale out from that approach slowly but surely.
I made the bet on growth over money.
Yeah. That's a great
I
way
still
to say
have it. Now I'm
that's a great
forced
way
to
say
focus on money a little more. I'm still terrible at it because I'm always focused on growth. Because I'm like, if you have growth, the money will come. And that is true, but you got to get big to do that. So it's a battle. And I've been lucky to have people in my ear over the last 6 months like, listen, you idiot. This is a reality. You got to focus on this too. And I'm like, you're right. Sometimes it takes a minute.
Yeah.
And then we're better at it.
But
I'm not.
It's tough in a crowded space too. We literally just had conversations just now about how crowded the space is and like, you know, how difficult it is to stick out. And if you're not even focused on the growth as the first and foremost, like money is a part of the first two things you think about, you're probably fucked.
I mean, there's a lot of things. We all have flaws. I got them. Just like I got a lot more than everyone else, I'm sure. But if there's one thing I have obviously demonstrated in my life to this point, I'd say at all facets, but let's even focus on my adult life, it's that money will not sway me. I mean, I'm stupid. Like, you know what I left on the table there, never look back. Because I didn't want to do that. So, I'm like, take it. You earned it. Take it. No, sorry. Like, because I'll want to leave in a couple years, and that would be disloyal to you guys. Loyalty is my number one thing with that. I just would never, I could never do that to Larry. Be like, all right, let me collect this check for a couple years and then peace on him and add 2 more years to my journey. No. Besides, like, legally, I could do that all day. But, like, you know how fucked up that would be?
Yeah.
He was literally bringing me into the inner sanctum over there. It doesn't get better than that.
And you've always told me that over the years. Yeah, you've always been appreciative of that.
Yeah, dude, I'll never forget that. I mean, he was so supportive of me with it. I know he was personally disappointed, right? Because we had such like a father-son relationship. You know, we'd butt heads, like have fun, like everything. And I miss working with him. I really, sometimes I'll be, and it's funny, man, because I have to edit myself on video. You are a product. The way you act is a product of the people you're around in your life. And I'm, as an only child, I'm Mr. Observatory of other people. And that is why I act the way I act and talk the way. There's all different people I could point to that I picked up things. But sometimes shooting the shit on a podcast with somebody and breaking balls, I'll hear it back and I'll be like, oh my God, that's Larry. Like the same tone, the same type of line, the same everything. And it's just because like I sat with him every day forever and he was the best. He could break balls with the 90-year-old and the 20-year-old. He was so good, and he disarmed people because people would either be like, I fucking love this guy, or sometimes like, God damn, this guy has no filter, but I like him for it. And it was so endearing because then he was great at his job, you know? And so people, they mostly got with it. It was so powerful. And I guess without thinking of it, there's some of it I picked up. Like there was a clip I just put on Instagram from the Matt Cox episode in like a post with a bunch of pictures where from the most recent episode where I'm going back and forth. We had Jim DiOrio, the FBI agent, your mutual friend with me, in the third seat, and then Matt in the seat. And I love busting Matt's balls. He loves busting people's balls too. So it's a comfort thing. But I'm watching that clip, and that's one of them where I'm like, oh my God, that's so Larry. Like every line, like the tone, and I'm like, oh my God.
This is what you're trying to do with Alessi through osmosis?
No, Alessi, I think Alessi is horrified by the state of New Jersey. I don't think he wants to pick that up. I'm like a science experiment to him. He like reports home like, you guys won't believe this shit.
Trust me, still to me sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I was, you would like, sometimes I just like look across the room and like you or Mitch would just be like watching me. And I'm like, I feel like this isn't a good thing. We're going to keep going. we're gonna. And Matt Mangino too would just be. He was just fascinated. It's like, God, this guy's fascinating. It's like Steve Irwin in the wild, and I'm like the kangaroo.
Well, part of what was really cool about that too is I think I learned a lot about consistency, if I were to use that word, right? Because it was clear that we all felt the same way, that even though we had a goal in mind, it's not like we were trying to do something get rich quick kind of deal. We all knew like, hey, we're going to dedicate and put a lot of time into things that we're doing. And that's it. That's that, like no complaints, going to be consistent.
You know what I realized though? I don't know if I've ever said this to you.
What's that?
This happened right before the pandemic when I was in that transition period and I had to really focus on that and I had to step back out. I was like, from the outside, it looks like everything we're doing is a get rich quick scheme. And I'll tell you why. It wasn't because it was. It was because we still had our one foot into the career and 1 foot into what we were trying to do. So by the limited time and resources, working at nights on the week and then on the weekends and grinding when we couldn't, still trying to have a good time, which we did. You were always, all of us, we were hanging on by a thread. And so things would fail because of that, because there wasn't enough resources there. That's why when Mitch came to me on July 4th, 2021, when he would come over and check on me on the edits, and we had a long conversation and he was like, hey, I'm really good at this thing I'm doing. I'm going to leave what I would call like the cushiest, greatest fucking job ever, where it was making him a wealthy man. He's like, I'm going to leave it and go all in on this. And I turned to him without hesitation, like, Mitch, I think you should do that. And he did. And here he is today, still grinding at that exact fucking thing, adjusting to, like, I'm so proud of him. Everyone has to get to their spot in a different way. And I think, I don't like telling my friends how to get there. We have conversations where I'm like, well, why aren't you doing this or doing that? But like, you gotta do what I did. It's, like, you guys all gave me very large hints for a long time, which I appreciated. But you were never like, Julian, you fucking idiot. Here's what you're gonna do. You let me get there. And when I did that, it was the one thing that I felt like, okay, I control this. I make this decision. And I'm grateful for that because, and it wouldn't even make people a bad friend for like trying to tell you. But, the best I got was people were like, you should do this.
Well, I agree with you there, actually. Your decision to do it, I never for once thought that you're doing it for someone else. Like, it was clear that the decision that you made was like your decision over a period of time. It didn't happen overnight. You knew.
It didn't. There was a definitive moment, obviously, that ended up happening. But yeah, exactly. It happened. It started happening in January 2018, and I could actually say it started happening with my Uncle Tony summer 2017. But a lot of it stayed subconscious. Sometimes it would come out to the surface, and I have a talk with someone close to me, be like, I'm out. And then the next day, oh no, we're working on this new investment, Yeah. And you'd kind of give back, but
well, life's kind of funny too, because you think about the timing of when we've all thought about these things, and it's literally around the same age.
Yes. Yeah, man.
What do you think that is? Like, you get 5 years into a work career. Is that when people are usually evaluating what they want to do? Is that just common?
I think you're right, man. I think there's something. I don't know if it's I don't know the answer to that, but I do think there's a cutoff point there somewhere. Maybe it is 5 years. Maybe it's 3. For me, it should have been 2.5. But my dumb ass takes a while to make a goddamn decision. I mean, I'm the guy who looks at the menu for 20 minutes and be like, I don't know if I want that or I want, I'm just such a fucking idiot. But, eventually I got there. There's some point, though, where people are like, even if it's just one basic thing of the real world, they're like, oh, that's how that kind of works. Didn't realize that. How does that change my perspective on things now? Boom. And then you're like that. And when I remember, because I'm a creative guy. So I'm very perceptive. I got that only child thing. I'm people watching. I remember going down in that musty basement at 264 Kennedy. Was it 364 or 264? 366.
I don't even remember.
Fuck, photographic memory is failing right there. But I remember going down in that basement like, special shit is happening here. I don't know what it is, but I'm digging the vibe. don't know who the fuck that guy over there tripping balls is right now, but I love it. And then people were like coming in, like you had people from every race and creed come in. I thought it was like a plan, like a joke on me, like coming in that night doing. Some people came in and started playing guitar, like in the corner. Like I don't know if like a homeless person walked in and like took some food downstairs. For all I know, that happened too. It was awesome, and I'm like, yo, I live in an apartment that's falling in on me in Morristown, and I work in finance all day. This shit's great. Like this is fun. I was so pissed when you guys got rid of that place. I wanted to kill all of you. Not really, but in my head, you know, because it was such a place of thought and grind mode and fun mode too. A lot of fun in that place.
I get it now, like looking back too, because even having you all here today, it's been fun. Because usually the past 3 years I've been more in like a work setting where I'm in the same company and it's the same kind of people talking about the same thing, but you kind of feel a different type of motivation when you're around different people pursuing different things, but they're tangential to each other because you just know that it's, hey, two people with like passions that they have.
Dude,
two different groups, you know what I mean?
got that same feel when I walked in the door today. And like, I like that, like Alessi's been working with me this whole time and it's like me and him, right? And he does so much work and I know what this is because I've done it too, like on his own, that I'm like, damn, we got to figure out something like this because like, I want Alessi to feel those vibes that I felt, you know, because believe it or not, like he's only 23 years old.
Yeah.
He's killing it. But like I want him to be able to experience that too. So unfortunately, you're in the faraway land of Brooklyn, so we're going to be here like once a year. But, you know, if we could have something like this, and that's, as I grow a team, I want to have people who can be there because there's nothing that replaces that. When you have people, you guys can, we used to be doing all different shit. I remember you were recording content videos for YouTube next to me while I'm working on like financial plans in like a cutoff hoodie on like, actually it was like December 28th. I remember this. It was like December 28th or 29th, 2018. So like 5 years ago, exactly. I remember that. And like, we're like, Amon's making music over there. Mitch is doing God knows what. And everyone's just like doing their work at this little table. And I was like, yes. Yes, this is good.
That's what I mean, bro. That's what I mean about the consistency and the sense of more of like work ethic. Like I always know that was what I observed at such a young age growing up. I'm like, hey, this is what like people that are trying to do something do and how much work they put into something. They don't care what time it is. Mm-hmm. You know, so I definitely I'm very appreciative of that and very fond of those memories. But
do we still have those videos? I gotta be tagged. Yeah, we do.
Of you catching the mouse?
We do.
8% body fat.
Okay.
Wait.
Goal number 1, I got 8% body fat.
Your goals.
It's getting hot in here. I feel like there's a lot of shade being thrown at me right now.
That was a great edit, by the way, right there.
Intro wise.
But you like, we're all working and suddenly you're coming in and like setting up cameras and shit. And I didn't know anything about this stuff then. I'm like looking at Mitch, like, what the fuck is he doing? He's like, don't worry about it. And then next thing I know, you're like practicing lines like, oh no, that wasn't good. I'm like, and then you're like, all right, rule number 1, I want to cut myself to 8% body fat.
Yo, 8%.
I remember going in your bedroom and there's like a little whiteboard with like 3 things. Be on the 25 under 25, do something else and cut down to 8%.
Yeah. Honestly, looking back, 8% probably would have been the hardest one out of all. Yo, 8%'s crazy. You should have told me that back then.
You had it like right, like when you brought a chick home, like was she looking at it like, how's the 8%? It was like right next to, like you can't miss that shit when you go there.
You should have warned me, bro. You didn't even say anything. You're just laughing about it. I thought it was attainable.
Oh, dude. Oh, my God.
That was probably the hardest, out of all of them, that would have been the hardest goal by far.
Oh, my God.
8%'s unrealistic.
Everything about that was, but I miss that so much. Like, no offense to your Brooklyn place. It's great. But, like, I miss Kennedy. It was good.
We gotta get you back up here. It's crazy that 2.5 hours already went by because I feel like I have a lot of questions to ask you, but
we'll do it again for sure. Anytime, you know that.
We gotta do follow up, and hopefully the follow up is after the big bet.
Yeah. Let's see how it goes.
And we could talk about that big bet. Everyone heard it here first. We'll be able to recap everything that you're thinking about.
I haven't said it out loud till now, so put the podcast out. You will be first with that.
Let's get it.
Talked about that bet.
Thanks for coming on the show, bro.
It's good to see you as always.
Good to see you
Great
too.
to see you making progress. Yeah.